Chapter 1491. Pingyang Town. In a quiet courtyard, the door opened with a creak, and a man with delicate features walked out. He wore a purple robe, and his expression was calm. "Young master, you're out of seclusion." Momo welcomed him. In his eyes, the martial Dao body seemed to have become a little different. There was an indescribable aura on his body. "Young master, you've already advanced to the conjoint body realm?" Momo asked with a delighted expression. "Yes," Wu Dao's true body nodded. Advancing to the conjoint body realm was much more difficult and dangerous than he had imagined. Throughout history, no one had managed to condense a heaven and earth Dharma characteristic that was 100 feet tall. Wu Dao's true body could only rely on himself to explore his path. After fusing with the supreme Dharma characteristic, Wu Dao's true body nearly collapsed and turned into nothingness several times. Thankfully, he managed to pull through and advance to the conjoint body realm to become a mighty figure. Right then, Wu Dao's true body seemed to have sensed something, and his expression changed as he turned to look into the distance. "Young master, what's wrong?" Momo asked curiously when she saw the strange expression on Wu Dao's true body's face. "Someone's here." Wu Dao's true body shook his head gently with a hint of mockery in his eyes. To think that a Pingyang town filled with mortals could attract a half-martial ancestor. "A half-martial ancestor expert is here?" Momo's heart skipped a beat. Wu Dao's true body had already said it, but he still could not sense any traces of a half-martial ancestor expert. Although they were both at the conjoint body realm, Wu Dao's true body's perception far surpassed Momo's. "Young master, I'll go beat them up." Momo raised her fists. "There's no need," Wu Dao's true body smiled indifferently. "It just so happens that I have some grudges to settle today." Right then, Momo exclaimed softly, "I sense them. What a powerful aura. These 4 people are not easy to deal with." Momo could sense that the 4 half-martial ancestors were extremely fast and had already arrived in the skies above Pingyang Town within a few dozen breaths. "Ordinary citizens of Pingyang Town, listen up." Half-martial ancestor Diju had a cold expression as he looked down and said indifferently, "All of you are very unlucky. Today, all of you will die. Your luck is also very bad." At this moment, a calm voice sounded from one of the houses. Was there anyone in Pingyang Town who dared to challenge a half-martial ancestor? Di Fan and the other 3 turned to look in the direction of the voice. Di Fan and the other 3 were stunned when they saw the people in the house. Disbelief flashed across their eyes. "This person, Araki Takashi." Di Fan was the first to react and shouted. The other 3 had only seen Su Zimo's portrait before. As for Di Fan, he had tried to kill Su Zimo twice and could only recognize Su Zimo immediately after seeing him in person. "You're actually hiding here." Chen Yu's eyes shone brightly. Initially, the 4 of them merely wanted to stroll around Pingyang Town and kill the mortals of Pingyang Town to vent their anger. To think that they would bump into Su Zimo in Pingyang Town. Swash! Half-martial ancestor Diju's figure flashed and arrived above the courtyard of Wu Dao's true body right away. His gaze was sharper than sword beams. "Everyone, the main character is here. Let's not let him escape." Half-martial ancestor Diju said slowly. "Something seems amiss." Di Fan frowned and scanned Wu Dao's true body. This person was identical to Araki Takashi. However, for some reason, Di Fan sensed an unusual aura from Wu Dao's true body. That aura made his heart skip a beat. However, he, half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant and half-martial ancestor Chen Yu still descended above the courtyard and formed an encirclement against Wu Dao's true body with half-martial ancestor Diju. "Araki Takashi." Half-martial ancestor Chen Yu grinned. "I heard that you wreaked havoc in Enigma Palace with torrential combat strength and even suppressed the Palace Lord of Enigma Palace. Today, let's see what capabilities you have." Half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant said, "Araki Takashi, your cultivation hasn't improved at all in the past 20 years. To think that you're still at the early stage conjoint body realm." Half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant relaxed slightly. Thankfully, Araki Takashi's cultivation did not improve much. Araki Takashi, hand over the heaven-slaying sword art and I can leave you with an intact corpse. Half-martial ancestor Diju said coldly. Oh. Wu Dao's true body shifted his gaze and swept it across half-martial ancestor Diju. Narrowing his eyes, he murmured, "What a powerful sword chi and rich killing intent." That sword chi and killing intent was similar to the heaven-slaying sword chi. However, there were clear differences. Seems like you've cultivated the earth-slaying sword art. Wu Dao's true body smiled gently and nodded. You came at the right time. You saved me the trouble of looking for it. You want to covet my earth-slaying sword art? Half-martial ancestor Diju could tell what Wu Dao's true body meant and his expression turned even colder. Wu Dao's true body no longer looked at half-martial ancestor Diju. Turning to Di Fan, he said slowly, "Old dog Di Fan, as a half-martial ancestor, you killed me twice in a row. It's good that you came today." Before he could finish his sentence, Wu Dao's true body stood up and stomped gently on the ground. Swoosh. Instantly, barriers rose in the courtyard, isolating this place from Pingyang Town completely. Di Fan and the other three were shocked and summoned their destiny-dermic weapons right away. Half-martial ancestor Qin Yu took out a pair of gigantic astral hammers from his storage bag. This pair of hammers of stars was completely made from the stars that fell from the sky. Each one of them weighed tens of thousands of caddies and could easily crush a mountain. I've long heard that Araki Takashi is invincible in melee combat. Today, I'll see if you're truly capable or not. Half-martial ancestor Qin Yu hollered and channeled his blood chi, reaching the tsunami blood realm instantly. Half-martial ancestor Qin Yu strode towards Wu Dao's true body. With every step he took, the entire world would tremble. In just 3 strides, half-martial ancestor Qin Yu had already arrived before Wu Dao's true body. After taking those 3 strides, half-martial ancestor Qin Yu's aura had already reached its limits. "Eat my hammer." Half-martial ancestor Qin Yu's voice was like a bell as he swung the astral hammers in his hands and smashed them towards the head of Wu Dao's true body. The astral hammers were several times larger than Wu Dao's true body. A huge shadow shrouded over, as though the world was about to collapse. "Attack!" At the same time, Di Fan hollered as well. Dermic powers surged within his body and he extended his palm through the void, forming a gigantic millstone in midair that crushed towards Wu Dao's true body. Great Chaos Essence Palm. Light of Glorious Sun. Half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant conjured hand seals with both hands and a blazing sun seemed to be conjured between his hands, emitting a blinding light. There were more than 10,000 rays of light. Every single ray of light contained terrifying energy that could pierce the body of a conjoint body mighty figure with ease. Earth emits killing intent, dragon snake rises. Half-martial ancestor Diju hollered softly and closed his sword fingers, slashing gently towards Wu Dao's true body. Swoosh. Endless sword chi condensed instantly, forming a gigantic sword that was incomparably ferocious, as though it wanted to pierce a hole in the firmaments. It descended with a terrifying might. That sword strike was like the descent of a divine dragon that looked down on the world, as though it wanted to slice everything in front of it into nothingness. Chapter 1492. The attack of the 4 half-martial ancestors was terrifying. However, the expression of Wu Dao's true body did not change at all. It was frighteningly calm. If he was at the Dharma characteristic realm, the combined forces of the 4 half-martial ancestors would indeed cause some trouble for him. However, now that he was at the conjoint body realm, the attacks of Di Fan and the other 3 were nothing in his eyes. Rumble. Boom. Wu Dao's true body channeled his bloodline as well and reached the tsunami blood level right away. Similarly, the blood chi of Wu Dao's true body surged through his body like a tsunami blood, boundless and exuding a scorching temperature. It was as though a gigantic volcano was erupting within the body of Wu Dao's true body and terrifying lava almost drowned half-martial ancestor Qin Yu. Half-martial ancestor Qin Yu's blood chi was completely suppressed by Wu Dao's true body. Against the attacks of the 4 half-martial ancestors, Wu Dao's true body was in no hurry. He punched in reverse towards the descending stellar hammer. Araki Takashi, you're truly arrogant. To think that you would dare to receive my half-martial ancestor dermic weapon barehanded. It's like hitting an egg with. Before half-martial ancestor Chen Yu could finish his sentence, a deafening bang sounded from the battlefield. Boom. The fist of Wu Dao's true body collided heavily against Qin Yu's half-martial ancestor dermic weapon, Stellar Hammer. This scene looked somewhat laughable. As half-martial ancestor Qin Yu had said, it was like hitting a rock with an egg. However, it was different from what he had imagined. His hammer of stars was not that stone. The fist of Wu Dao's true body was the indestructible rock. After a deafening bang, half-martial ancestor Qin Yu shuddered and his eyes widened in disbelief. He sensed a terrifying power that was as turbulent as the sea and as violent as fire surging into the stellar hammer. He could not withstand that power at all. Instantly, half-martial ancestor Qin Yu's palm was torn apart and blood dripped. Not to mention his palm, even the flesh and blood on his entire arm exploded in an instant, bursting into a cloud of blood mist. The hammer of stars flew out of his hand. At the same time, Wu Dao body stretched out his other hand and grabbed at the giant sword formed by the earth-slaying sword Qi that was slashing down from the sky. You're courting death, half-martial ancestor Di Ju coldly said. The palm of Wu Dao's true body directly grabbed the dragon-like earth slaughter sword into two halves and casually threw it on the ground. The sword Qi dissipated. At the same time, Wu Dao himself flicked his finger without even turning his head. Clang. On the battlefield, there was a strange sound of metal clashing. Another sword Qi dissipated. Half-martial ancestor Di Ju's expression finally changed. When the earth unleashes its killing intent, dragons and serpents rise from the ground. The earth-slaying sword Qi that he unleashed actually contained two moves. One of the moves was a giant sword that resembled a divine dragon slashing down. The other move was a sword energy that was as thin as gossamer and was like a poisonous snake. It silently pierced towards Wu Dao's true body. That was the true killing move of the earth-slaying sword art. Over the years, there were extremely few cultivators who could defend against the divine dragon gigantic sword. Even if they could defend against the divine dragon gigantic sword, no one could escape the killing power of the poisonous snake sword Qi. However, half-martial ancestor Di Ju had not expected that Wu Dao's true body would be able to destroy the earth-slaying sword art with a casual punch and finger. The earth-slaying sword art is truly a waste in your hands. Wu Dao's true body sneered. The reason why he could destroy half-martial ancestor Di Ju's earth-slaying sword Qi casually was because his body was incomparably strong to begin with. It was also because half-martial ancestor Di Ju had not comprehended the essence of the earth-slaying sword art. The light of glorious sun? It's nothing. Suddenly, Wu Dao's true body shouted, "Destroy!" His body was like a Wu Dao furnace and his martial spirit burned continuously. The sudden roar that he released was even more terrifying than any sound domain's secret skill. Crack, 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 crack. The blazing sun that was just condensed in the hands of the half-martial ancestor Di Ju began to crack as its dermic powers dissipated. In the blink of an eye, it collapsed completely. Wu Dao's true body roared and destroyed the half-martial ancestor Di Ju's dermic art. It was only at this moment that Wu Dao's true body turned around and looked at the descending Great Chaos Essence Palm. Great Chaos Essence Palm? Wu Dao's true body nodded slightly. This secret skill is not bad. Wu Dao's true body did not put up a stance and punched. Boom. The millstone-like palm in midair exploded instantly and its dermic powers dissipated. The four half-martial ancestors were ashen. The strength of Wu Dao's true body had far exceeded their imaginations. In fact, he was much stronger than the Araki Takashi from the battle at Enigma Palace and the Araki Takashi in their memories. In fact, the purple-robed Araki Takashi did not even use any dermic weapons and appeared calm. With his bare hands, he destroyed their dermic weapons, dermic arts, and secret skills. Something's not right. D Fan seemed to have realized something and exclaimed, "You're not that Araki Takashi. This body of yours is definitely not Qinglian's true body. You're not a dragon phoenix either. Who exactly are you?" Even the grade 7 creation realm Qinglian doesn't have such power. Wu Dao's true body smiled and said, "You're right. The Araki Takashi in front of Enigma Palace and the Araki Takashi of Dragons are only true bodies that I cultivated. What you guys are seeing now is Araki Takashi's true body." The words Araki Takashi's true body shattered the confidence of the 4 half-martial ancestors. 3 true bodies. Araki Takashi had 3 true bodies. The 2 true bodies that appeared in the cultivation world previously were not Araki Takashi's strongest strength. At the thought of that, Di Fan and the other 3 felt chills run down their spines. Qinglian's true body and Dragon Phoenix's true body alone almost turned the entire Tianhuang mainland upside down, and the situation changed drastically. What would it be like if the true body of Araki Takashi before them were to appear? Di Fan and the other 3 did not dare to continue thinking. There was no need for Di Fan and the other 3 to communicate at all. They turned and fled tacitly. Among them, Di Fan even took out a major transference talisman from his storage bag and tore it apart, wanting to teleport and leave this place. However, before the great battle, the martial Dao body had already sealed off this part of the world. It was impossible for half-martial ancestor Di Ju and the others to break through the barrier within a short period of time. Even the major transference talisman was useless. Wu Dao's true body strode forward and arrived behind half-martial ancestor Qinyu in the blink of an eye. Raising his fist, he smashed down viciously. Ah! Sensing danger, half-martial ancestor Qinyu roared furiously and his face turned purplish-green. A vicious glint flashed through half-martial ancestor Qinyu's eyes as he swung his arm and waved his other astral hammer. Ignoring the punch from Wu Dao's true body, he smashed it towards the head of Wu Dao's true body. This was a method of exchanging a life for a life with an internecine outcome. Wu Dao's true body ignored half-martial ancestor Qinyu's astral hammer and continued smashing down with his fist. He punched half-martial ancestor Qinyu's head. At the same time, the astral hammer smashed onto the head of Wu Dao's true body. Half-martial ancestor Qinyu's head was shattered by a single punch from Wu Dao's true body. His essence spirit was destroyed and he died on the spot. As for Wu Dao's true body, it was unharmed. The astral hammer could not break through his body either. Wu Dao's true body did not have any dermic weapons. His body was his strongest dermic weapon. Chapter 1493. Half-martial ancestor Qinyu was killed by a single punch from Wu Dao's true body. When they saw that, Di Fan and the other 2 were scared out of their wits and had terrible expressions. Ever since they became half-martial ancestors, they had never felt as though their lives were hanging by a thread. Mahayana patriarchs were all comprehending divine powers in the advanced ancient battlefield and would not appear easily. Half-martial ancestors were the strongest existences in Tianhuang mainland. Furthermore, they were the strongest paragons among the half-martial ancestors. Who could threaten them? But today, the 3 of them watched as half-martial ancestor Qinyu was killed by Araki Takashi with a single punch. The 3 of them felt their scalps tingle as though they were imagining their deaths. Bang, bang, bang. Di Fan and the other 2 even charged at the surrounding barriers in a frenzy, wanting to break through the restraints and charge out of this world. Why are you guys making such pointless struggles? Wu Dao's true body said indifferently, even if you guys can break through the spatial barrier here, you won't be able to escape from my pursuit. That statement destroyed the last trace of hope in Di Fan and the other 2's hearts. The 3 of them could not help but ask themselves, even if they escaped, would Araki Takashi's true body not be able to catch up to them? Just as the 3 of them were distracted, Wu Dao's true body arrived before half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant in the blink of an eye as though he was taking a stroll. You can die too. Wu Dao's true body said casually, as though he had already announced the death penalty for half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant. Araki Takashi. Seeing that there was no way to dodge, half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant's eyes shone brightly as he grit his teeth. You're too much. Do you really think that I don't have any trump cards? Before he finished his sentence, half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant channeled his bloodline maniacally. Rumble. Boom. The sound of a tsunami echoed from half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant's body. That was not the end. Half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant's aura was still rising rapidly. Glorious Elephant Heaven and Earth. Half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant hollered. Swoosh. A starry sky appeared behind half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant with 36 heavenly constellations shone with a resplendent light. Bloodline phenomenon. D-Fan and half-martial ancestor D-Ju revealed surprised expressions when they witnessed this scene. They'd known half-martial ancestor Luminous Elephant for many years, yet they were utterly unaware that half-martial ancestor Luminous Elephant was hiding such a trump card. Even half-martial ancestor Chen Yu, who was most proud of his physical body and bloodline, was unable to condense a bloodline phenomenon. The astonishment in the eyes of D-Fan and half-martial progenitor D-Ju was replaced by great terror and astonishment as soon as it rose. Wu Dao's true body made a move. There was no spell or secret technique. It was just a simple punch. Boom. A deafening boom rang out. The 36 Big Dipper stars in the sky shattered. Half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant's expression changed continuously as he staggered backwards. Every time he took a step back, he would spit out a mouthful of blood. Rumble. This bloodline phenomenon was actually destroyed by Wu Dao's true body with a single punch. Invincible. There was no chance at all. The power displayed by Wu Dao's true body made D-Fan and half-martial ancestor D-Ju feel a sense of despair. In fact, the two of them could not even muster the desire to resist. The collapse of half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant's bloodline phenomenon caused his body to suffer a tremendous impact as well, and cracks appeared on his organs. Araki Takashi, you. Just as half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant was about to speak, Wu Dao's true body had already arrived before him. Without giving him a chance to continue, Wu Dao extended his fair palm and patted the half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant's head gently. Instantly, half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant's gaze dimmed. His head appeared to be intact. However, his consciousness was already penetrated by the power of Wu Dao's true body and was smashed into pieces. His essence spirit was destroyed and he was dead. The corpse of half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant fell from midair. 2 punches and 1 palm strike and 2 half-martial ancestors were dead. D-Fan and half-martial ancestor D-Ju could only watch helplessly as this scene unfolded. They could only feel their limbs turn cold. At that moment, the pride of half-martial ancestor D-Ju vanished without a trace. Half-martial ancestors were at the peak of the cultivation world and could kill all the mortals of Pingyang Town with a single thought. However, half-martial ancestors were no different from mortals in the face of death. At that moment, their reputation and glory of the past turned into smoke. Right then, Wu Dao's true body turned around and looked at D-Fan and half-martial ancestor D-Ju, who were not far away. D-Fan, Wu Dao's true body said indifferently, "You tried to kill me twice but failed. You're dead meat now that I've attacked once." D-Fan had not expected that this existence that was even more insignificant than an ant in his eyes would possess such strength today. In fact, he could even look down on him and control his life and death. Back then, in the Dao Inheritance Ground, he forcefully tore open the space of the Dao Inheritance Ground and tried to kill Araki Takashi. At that time, Araki Takashi could not resist at all. Even the creation Qinglian was shattered by him. How many years had it been? To think that Araki Takashi would have grown to this extent. Araki Takashi, half-martial ancestor D-Ju's expression changed as he suddenly said, "I don't have any deep feud with you. I'm only here for your heaven-slaying sword art. If you let me live today, I'm willing to hand over the earth-slaying sword art." Half-martial ancestor D-Ju knew very well that he could not move Araki Takashi without sufficient chips. Therefore, he did not harbor any hopes of getting lucky and said directly that he could hand over the earth-slaying sword art. "Indeed, there's no deep feud between us," Wu Dao's true body said. "However, since you intend to kill all the mortals of Pingyang Town, I can't let you live. As for the earth-slaying sword art, even if you don't hand it over, I can take it myself." Before he finished his sentence, Wu Dao's true body attacked once more. Swoosh. Unknowingly, Wu Dao's true body had already arrived before half-martial ancestor Di Ju and punched over. In the eyes of others, the punch of Wu Dao's true body was the most ordinary fist technique without any tricks or fancy movements. However, one would only be able to sense how terrifying that punch was when they truly faced it. The will pressure released by that punch almost caused half-martial ancestor Di Ju's Dao heart to collapse. In his vision, Wu Dao's true body was no longer there. There was only that punch left. Buzz. A sword hum sounded. Half-martial ancestor Di Ju drew his sword and attacked. His arm and wrist didn't move much, but this sword had already pierced out. It was sharp and fierce to the extreme. Clang. The sharpness of the sword slashed against the fist of Wu Dao's true body. However, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Half-martial ancestor Di Ju's expression changed in shock and his entire arm went numb. Kill! Suddenly, a sword beam shone in half-martial ancestor Di Ju's eyes. That sword beam pierced straight for the eyes of Wu Dao's true body. Visual technique. The two of them were way too close. However, the burst of the visual technique arrived instantly. Wu Dao's true body could not dodge either. Wu Dao's true body had a mocking expression and merely closed his eyes. Clang. This eye technique sword light pierced the martial Dao true body's eyelid but did not pierce in at all. It only left behind a faint white mark. It could not even be considered as a wound. The next moment, Wu Dao's true body opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, he wanted to kill. Chapter 1494. Half-martial ancestor Di Ju's visual technique was useless and he had already lost the initiative. Wu Dao's true body opened his eyes and strode forward. Half-martial ancestor Di Ju raised his sword and stabbed. Wu Dao's true body's gaze was like a torch as he dodged the sword and flicked his finger gently, flicking the spine of the sword. That was the weakest part of the sword. The sword trembled violently and was almost snapped into two by Wu Dao's true body. Half-martial ancestor Di Ju could not hold onto his destiny dermic weapon and it flew out of his hands. Wu Dao's true body scooped up the sword gently and stabbed in reverse. Given the strength and speed of Wu Dao's true body, any punch or slash could release shocking lethality. Half-martial ancestor Di Ju could not dodge at all and his chest was pierced by his own destiny dermic weapon. This was not the end. Suddenly, half-martial ancestor Di Ju's expression changed. His destiny dermic weapon in his chest seemed like it was about to explode. There was no time to think. With a whoosh, half-martial ancestor Di Ju's essence spirit broke free from his head. At that moment, his natal dermic artifact exploded into sharp shards that sliced his body into pieces. Before he could react, a huge shadow enveloped him. Wu Dao's true body reached out and captured half-martial ancestor Di Ju's essence spirit in his palm. Kill! Di Fan realized that Wu Dao's true body would not let him off at all. He went all out and channeled his essence spirit to its limits, releasing 5 dermic arts and a secret skill in succession. At the same time, he swiped his storage bag and threw out more than 10 dermic weapons in a single breath. Those dermic arts, secret skills and dermic weapons blanketed the skies and suppressed Wu Dao's true body. You're just struggling on your deathbed, Wu Dao's true body said with an indifferent expression. You can't even defend against a single punch of mine. Boom! Wu Dao's true body attacked. The punch was as vast as the ocean, instantly drowning the Dharma spells and secret arts in midair and devouring them without a trace. Dozens of magic tools were also sent flying in all directions by Wu Dao's fist. When they fell down, they were already dim and completely useless. Di Fan, you're finished. Wu Dao's true body looked down at Di Fan. The difference in strength between the two sides was too great. Back when Wu Dao's true body was at the Dharma characteristic realm, he had to release his bloodline phenomenon in order to suppress Yu Luosha. Now that Wu Dao's true body had reached the body integration stage, he hadn't even activated his bloodline phenomenon. Boom! Wu Dao's true body punched out. Di Fan hurriedly tore apart the protection talisman. He had found the talisman when he was exploring the ancient ruins. It was able to resist the attacks of 10 half-martial progenitors, let alone a single half-martial progenitor. However, this protective talisman could not withstand a single punch from Wu Dao's true body. Kakaka. The talisman shattered. However, the aftershock of that punch was still abnormally terrifying. Di Fan's body exploded as well, creating a blood mist that was completely unrecognizable. Wu Dao's true body stepped forward and extended his finger, tapping Di Fan's glabella gently. Di Fan could not defend at all, and his head was penetrated by Wu Dao's true body's finger instantly, dripping with blood. Suddenly, a terrifying fluctuation of divine sense spread across the place. Di Fan knew that he was going to die and did not want to be humiliated. As such, he channeled his essence spirit without care, wanting to self-destruct and commit suicide on the spot. Humph! Wu Dao's true body sneered, "You want to commit suicide in front of me? You can only die if I allow you to. If I don't, you won't even have the right to commit suicide." That sentence caused Di Fan to despair completely. A sense of sorrow rose in his heart. As a half-martial ancestor, he could not even control his own life and death. "Araki Takashi, what are you trying to do?" Di Fan asked hatefully. Half-martial ancestor Dust Feather and half-martial ancestor Glorious Elephant had the least feud with Araki Takashi. However, they were killed cleanly by Araki Takashi. However, he and half-martial ancestor Diju were left behind by Araki Takashi. Araki Takashi was definitely not a merciful person. Could it be? Di Fan thought of a possibility. "Araki Takashi, how dare you?" Suddenly, Di Fan roared and wanted to struggle with all his might. However, pitch-black chains appeared from the ball of light in the palm of Wu Dao's true body and coiled tightly around the essence spirits of Di Fan and half-martial ancestor Diju. Soul-searching art. Wu Dao's true body had already cultivated more than 30 inheritances in the Dao inheritance ground. The reason why he left Di Fan and half-martial ancestor Diju behind was because of their secret skill inheritances. The earth-slaying sword art was something that Wu Dao's true body had to obtain. The soul search began. Wu Dao's true body was immersed in the memories of Di Fan and Diju, browsing rapidly and filtering out all useless information. A moment later, the primordial spirits of Di Fan and half-martial progenitor Diju had dimmed. Their expressions were dull and lifeless. It was as though the essence spirits of the two half-martial ancestors were stripped of their memories and turned into idiots. He gained a lot from the soul search this time round. The Great Chaos Essence Palm and Earth-Slaying Sword art were both obtained by Wu Dao's true body. Now that Wu Dao's true body had entered the conjoint body realm, his cultivation speed slowed down. If he wanted to increase his speed and cultivation as soon as possible, the easiest way was to make use of Wu Dao's furnace to refine cultivation techniques and secret skills continuously. He would then convert those cultivation techniques and secret skills into his own insights. But now, Wu Dao's true body had obtained two top-tier cultivation techniques, the Great Chaos Essence Palm and Earth-Slaying Sword art. As long as he could refine them, his strength would definitely rise once more. As for the storage bags of the four half-martial ancestors, there should be some good stuff in them as well. That's a good idea. Wu Dao's true body narrowed his eyes in deep thought. Pingyang town regained its peace before long. Far west, Kunlun ruins. It had been 20 years since Su Zimo and the other two entered seclusion in the mystic realm of Kunlun ruins. The power contained within that huge section of carefree wood was immense. By the 5th year after Su Zimo refined and absorbed it, he had already broken through to the mid-stage conjoint body realm. However, he had only refined a small portion of the power within the carefree wood. Su Zimo did not stop and continued cultivating. In the 10th year, Nian Qi broke through and entered the mid-stage conjoint body realm. In the 16th year, Extreme Fire broke through and entered the late-stage conjoint body realm. After entering the conjoint body realm, cultivation became extremely difficult. It was normal for one to make no progress in their cultivation for hundreds or thousands of years. If they were in Tianhuang mainland, even if they had a massive opportunity, it would be difficult for Extreme Fire and Nian Qi to advance a minor cultivation realm in a short 20 years. However, in Kunlun ruins, Extreme Fire and Nian Qi grew rapidly in such an unfamiliar and repressed environment. 20 years passed in the blink of an eye. Su Zimo was still cultivating and refining the carefree wood. This large piece of worryless wood was already more or less refined by him. As for his cultivation realm, he had already reached the peak of the mid-stage conjoint body realm and was only a step away from breaking through. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi had already stopped cultivating. The two of them were not like Su Zimo, who had a treasure like the carefree wood that could absorb energy continuously and continue cultivating. However, the two of them continued to guard Su Zimo's side, waiting for Su Zimo to end his cultivation. This day, Nian Qi, who was initially cultivating, suddenly opened his eyes and frowned slightly. Before long, Extreme Fire opened his eyes as well and frowned, saying softly, "Someone's here." Chapter 1495. The direction of the person was not the entrance they came from, but another direction. Su Zimo and the other two had yet to explore this secret realm, so they did not know where that direction led to. "Let's go and take a look." Extreme Fire sent a voice transmission with his spirit consciousness. He and Nian Qi stood up quietly and headed in the direction of the person. They did not alarm Su Zimo, who was still cultivating. As they walked along the passageway, they could see some corpses on the ground. They were all people who had died back then. Suddenly, the two of them stopped at the same time and exchanged glances. Their figures flashed and they arrived at a dark corner. They restrained their auras and hid. A series of messy footsteps sounded from afar. It sounded like there were at least a dozen people. The auras emitted by these people were extremely powerful. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi looked at each other with solemn expressions. Among the dozen or so auras, the two of them even sensed the aura of a half-martial ancestor. However, they had also encountered countless battles in the periphery of the Kunlun ruins, and they had killed many half-martial ancestor powerhouses. Both of their cultivation had improved, so they were naturally not afraid and continued to listen. "Divine Envoy, it's all thanks to you that we were able to break the formation outside." "That's right. This formation has been in Kunlun ruins since ancient times. All these years, no one has been able to break it." Two compliments were heard. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi nodded secretly. From the looks of it, this group of people should be from Kunlun ruins. It was very likely that they were from the Kunlun clan. Then, another person said, "It's nothing. The Tao of formations has been passed down for a long time where we come from. I have some attainments in it." Extreme Fire and Nian Qi frowned at the same time. The person who spoke later was obviously the Divine Envoy. On the other hand, the Divine Envoy's tone was a little strange. His words were choppy and his pronunciation was not standard. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi had to distinguish carefully before they could understand what he meant. "Who was the one who set up this formation?" The Divine Emissary spoke again. "This person is very powerful. If it weren't for the fact that too much time has passed and several of the formation's eyes have decayed, I wouldn't have been able to break this formation. I heard that she was a woman from Tianhuang mainland in the ancient era." Someone beside her said, "Because of the existence of the Kunlun barrier, this woman is the only one who has entered the Kunlun ruins and left alive." Hearing this, Nian Qi was shocked. The man continued, "No one knows who this woman is. She is a mystery." These people did not know, but Nian Qi knew. This was because the storyteller had once said that Fairy Ling Long had entered the Kunlun ruins. There were very few records about the Kunlun ruins in the Enigma Palace, and these precious records were all left behind by Fairy Ling Long. The woman that these people were talking about came from the ancient era, and it just so happened that she matched up with Fairy Ling Long. In other words, the owner of this secret realm was none other than Fairy Ling Long. Only Fairy Ling Long would be able to set up so many complicated formations at the entrance, and then set up a peerless formation at the other end, preventing the Kunlun tribe from deciphering it. Even the Divine Emissary who broke through the formation admitted that if not for the fact that too much time had passed and the formation's eye had shattered, he would not have been able to break through the formation. Extreme Fire was not present when the storyteller told them about Fairy Ling Long. Nian Qi secretly sent a voice transmission to Extreme Fire with her spirit consciousness. However, both of them were confused at the same time. Why did Fairy Linglong set up such a secret realm? Back then, what had happened in this secret realm? Someone said, "This mystery is about to be solved. We've already entered this place. We'll definitely be able to find clues left behind by that woman." Back then, the experts of our Kunlun race chased after this woman. To think that all of them died here. The Kunlun race members stepped on the corpses and walked in. "Look over there." Suddenly, someone exclaimed. "So many dermic weapons. There are also so many elixirs and cultivation techniques. There are all sorts of treasures over there. Heavens! So, the legends are true." The Kunlun race members exclaimed. "What's going on?" The voice of the divine emissary sounded. Immediately, someone from the Kunlun race replied, "Legend has it that after that woman entered the Kunlun ruins, she plundered a large number of treasures. Dermic weapons, elixirs, cultivation techniques, and countless treasures. To think that all these treasures would be preserved in this secret realm." At that point, Extreme Fire and Nian Chi's minds stirred. Firstly, they could not help but be shocked when they heard the news. Secondly, the two of them were even more puzzled. They could not understand why Fairy Linglong left so many treasures in this secret realm and did not take them away. "Someone's here." Right then, the divine emissary suddenly said. Immediately after, Extreme Fire and Nian Chi sensed a bedazzling light shining towards the corner where they were hiding. Boom! The wall in front of Extreme Fire and Extreme Fire collapsed instantly. Their figures were completely exposed. In the blink of an eye, countless gazes landed on the two of them. Their gazes were filled with terrifying murderous intent. The atmosphere in the entire mystic realm suddenly became tense and hostile. Extreme Fire swept his gaze. There were a total of 16 people from the Kunlun race opposite him. Although they were all in human form, it was clear that they were of different races and the bloodline auras they emitted were different as well. The attire of the Kunlun race was similar. Among the crowd, there was only one person who wore a wide white robe. Unlike the others, he looked conspicuous. If Extreme Fire was not wrong, this white-robed man should be the divine emissary that the Kunlun race was talking about. Nian Chi's gaze landed on the white-robed man as well. For some reason, Nian Chi sensed a familiar feeling from the white-robed man. The white-robed man was also looking at Nian Chi. There seemed to be something hidden in his eyes. Extreme Fire and Nian Chi could not sense the cultivation realm of the white-robed man. It was hazy, as though it was concealed by something. They were in a gigantic secret chamber with all sorts of treasures piled up beside them. On the wall, some delicate handwriting could be vaguely seen. It was covered with a layer of dust, so it was unknown what was written. Given the current situation, Extreme Fire and Nian Chi did not dare to be distracted and merely swept their gazes casually. Outsiders. The only half-martial ancestor of the Kunlun race stood out and looked at Extreme Fire and Extreme Fire with a ferocious gaze as he shouted. "Outsiders have entered," the white-robed man murmured in deep thought. "In other words, there's a high chance that the other end of this secret realm leads to Tianhuang mainland." That's right. The eyes of many Kunlun race beings lit up as well. The half-martial ancestor of the Kunlun race could not help but exclaim, "That woman is too powerful. To think that she could open a passageway under the envelopment of the Kunlun barrier." There was a Kunlun barrier in the Kunlun ruins. The people inside could not leave and the people outside could not enter. However, the existence of this secret realm broke that fact. Chapter 1496. Ha! The half-martial ancestor of the Kunlun race laughed loudly. "Since we know about this passageway, we can leave Kunlun ruins." That's right. Another Kunlun race member nodded and said, "We can finally leave this place and return to Tianhuang mainland. We will have a chance to step into the Mahayana realm and become true patriarchs to break free from the restraints of heaven and earth." Due to the fact that the primordial war was too terrifying, a divine power forbidden zone was left behind in Kunlun ruins. Once a Mahayana patriarch stepped in, it would cause a divine power storm. It was even more impossible for one to step into the Mahayana realm in Kunlun ruins. That was because as long as one comprehended a divine power, It would form a divine power storm. This meant that even if one successfully stepped into the Mahayana realm, they would die immediately and be torn apart by the divine power storm. Everyone, we are indeed from Tianhuang mainland, but we have no ill intentions towards you or Kunlun ruins. Extreme Fire's expression was calm as he cupped his hands slightly and did not rashly clash with the Kunlun race. The half-martial ancestor of the Kunlun race sneered, "Outsiders should be killed without mercy." "Kill them." The half-martial ancestor of the Kunlun race waved his hand casually, not taking Extreme Fire and Nian Qi seriously at all. Extreme Fire's expression turned cold as well. Extreme Fire was a mighty figure that intimidated an entire region in Tianhuang mainland. After his rebirth, his reputation was even more resounding after a few battles. He treated them with respect because he did not want to clash with the Kunlun race the moment he arrived at Kunlun ruins. However, since the Kunlun race wanted to kill him, he would not be afraid. Extreme Fire sneered as well, "If you want to kill me, you'll have to see if you have the ability." Before he could finish his sentence, two mighty figures of the Kunlun race had already arrived. One of them extended a rough hand with long hair and slapped down on the top of Extreme Fire's head. "Beast, how dare you be impudent in front of me?" Extreme Fire shouted softly and his glabella flickered. A scarlet cauldron flew out and smashed towards the mighty figure of the Kunlun race. The mighty figure of the Kunlun race also realized how powerful it was and reacted extremely quickly. He changed his move at the last minute and relied on his powerful body to clench his fist, punching towards the incoming cauldron. Boom! A loud bang. The fist of the Kunlun race mighty figure clashed with Extreme Fire's destiny dermic weapon. The powerful being of the Kunlun race shrieked as a look of agony appeared on his face. When his fist collided with Extreme Fire's destiny dermic weapon, his tendons and bones felt like they were being torn apart. The pain was unbearable and his palms swelled up instantly. This was not the end. On the body of this crimson-red cauldron, a blazing flame was ignited. It followed the fist of the Kunlun race and swept towards his body. The long hair on the arms of this Kunlun race big shot was burned into ashes in an instant. The intensity of the flames even incinerated this person's flesh and blood. Demonic chi billowed with blood gushing out, sprinkling over the flames. However, the crimson-red flames did not seem to be extinguished at all. Instead, they grew stronger and stronger. In the blink of an eye, the entire body of the Kunlun race mighty figure was engulfed. The powerful being of the Kunlun race roared in anger as he pushed his bloodline to the maximum, wanting to revert back to his true form. He was not a human. Only when he was in his true form could he unleash his full strength. However, Extreme Fire did not give him the chance. Extreme Fire grabbed with his palm and instantly, an incomparably dense and vast dermic power gathered in his palm, condensing into a spear that burned with flames. The spear was red and was completely burned through by the flames. Extreme Fire tossed in reverse. The spear transformed into a red beam of light and entered the person's chest, bursting with terrifying flames instantly. This flame began to burn from the inside out. In just a few breaths of time, the internal organs of this Kunlun race cultivator were all burned to ashes. Ah! The person struggled and screamed hysterically in the raging flames. However, he could not make it through in the end. The pain in his body was unbearable. His essence spirit broke out of his shell but was devoured by the flames rapidly and turned into ashes. He died. Although they were both at the conjoint body realm, this Kunlun race mighty figure could not last more than 3 rounds against Extreme Fire. The other conjoint body mighty figure that lunged towards Nian Qi was secretly shocked when he saw that. He did not dare to be careless and had already reverted to his true form in midair. Roar! It was a demon beast that was similar to a jackal. However, the bloodline aura of this demon beast was much more terrifying than that of a jackal. Its gaze was vicious and extremely ferocious. The demon beast was covered in scales from head to toe and had sharp claws and fangs. Its movement technique was agile and its speed was shockingly fast. This was a ferocious beast that was almost extinct in Tianhuang mainland, the Yazi. Not only was the Yazi ferocious and bloodthirsty, it was also extremely vengeful. As long as one offended it slightly, they would definitely bear a grudge. Such a powerful ferocious beast could only exist in the Kunlun ruins. The Yazi reverted to its true form and its blood chi surged. It arrived in front of Nian Qi and opened its mouth, biting towards Nian Qi. Nian Qi looked extremely weak and her body was not even as thick as one of the Yazi's arms. That bite could tear Nian Qi apart instantly. Not far away, the white-robed man watched everything with interest with a fake smile. Nian Qi's expression was calm and there was no hint of fear in her eyes. The moment the Yazi lunged forward, Nian Qi attacked. Boom! The sound of a tsunami echoed from Nian Qi's body. Golden blood chi surged and surged into the skies, suppressing the Yazi's bloodline instantly. Nian Qi extended her fair and tender palm and landed on the Yazi's head, pressing it towards the ground. Boom! The ground trembled and a huge pit was created by the Yazi's head. Most of the Yazi's sharp teeth were shattered and its mouth was filled with blood. The half-martial ancestor of the Kunlun race frowned slightly and murmured, "Protoss bloodline?" He glanced at the white-robed man instinctively. The white-robed man smiled gently. "It's just a remnant of the Protoss. Her bloodline is impure." Pausing for a moment, the white-robed man continued, "However, this woman is very talented. It's indeed rare for her to be able to cultivate a half-god bloodline to such an extent." By the time the white-robed man finished speaking, the battle on the other side had already come to an end. The Yazi struggled to stand up. However, it could not break free from the suppression of Nian Qi's palm. It was as though what was suppressing its head was not a palm, but an unshakable 100,000 mountains. Nian Qi channeled strength in his palm and a divine light burst forth from it, penetrating the Yazi's head instantly. The gigantic body of the pure-blooded ferocious beast froze for a moment before falling heavily to the ground, stirring up endless dust as it died on the spot. Given extreme fire and Nian Qi's current combat strength, there were very few conjoint body realm cultivators who could defeat them in a one-on-one fight. Their combat strengths were even capable of suppressing some half-martial ancestors. Apart from the white-robed man who was motionless, the remaining 13 Kunlun race beings, including the half-martial ancestor, stood out and surrounded Extreme Fire and Extreme Fire. Chapter 1497. Roar. The 13 Kunlun beings all transformed into their true forms. They were all sorts of primordial ferocious beasts. Some of them looked familiar while others were extinct in Tianhuang mainland. There was not a single human among the Kunlun beings. According to what Fairy Linglong had said, the Kunlun tribe was formed through the amalgamation of the remnants of the ancient war. During the era of the primordial war, the human race was still the weakest race among the 10,000 races. They were enslaved and did not even have the right to participate in the primordial war. Therefore, there were almost no humans in the Kunlun race. The half-martial ancestor of the Kunlun race was a Nine Neonate. Nine Neonate was a pure-blooded ferocious beast that was extremely ferocious. It had 9 heads that resembled strange snakes, and when it opened its mouth, it could let out the cries of a baby that bewitched one's mind. Back in the elementary ancient battlefield, Su Zimo encountered a Nine Neonate. However, the Nine Neonate before him had already cultivated to the half-martial ancestor realm and was much stronger than the one in the elementary ancient battlefield. The Nine Neonate reared its head and let out the cries of a baby. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi frowned and felt uncomfortable. Their blood chi surged and could not be suppressed. The 9 Neonates' dermic powers were extremely high, and a single sound domain secret skill was enough to affect Extreme Fire and Nian Qi. Rumble. Boom. At the same time, the other 12 conjoint body ferocious beasts charged forward towards Extreme Fire and Nian Qi. The ferocious beasts rampaged and the ground trembled with a series of violent sounds. Their momentum was terrifying, as though they could tear Extreme Fire and Nian Qi into pieces. Swoosh. Extreme Fire's expression was grim as he conjured hand seals repeatedly. Instantly, 3 scarlet flames burned beside him. The 3 balls of flames spun slowly around him. Scarlet flame revolving lantern. If he was only against 1 or 2 conjoint body mighty figures, the scarlet flame revolving lantern was enough to protect him. But now, with 12 conjoint body ferocious beasts lunging forward and a half-martial ancestor 9 neonate eyeing them covetously, Extreme Fire did not dare to hold back. Condense. Extreme Fire hollered softly and his hand seals changed once more. The 3 balls of scarlet flames quickly gathered together. The flames shone brightly. The Samadhi Dao fire descended. Extreme Fire pointed forward and the Samadhi Dao fire swept towards the 9 conjoint body ferocious beasts ahead. These ferocious beasts sensed danger. Some hurriedly stopped, while others relied on their agility to quickly move to the side, avoiding the range of the Samadhi Dao fire. Only 3 huge ferocious beasts that were relatively slow could not dodge and were enveloped by the Samadhi Dao fire. Ao. The 3 ferocious beasts immediately let out cries of agony. Their flesh and blood melted rapidly. Their blood was burned into ashes by the Samadhi Dao fire as soon as it came out. Rumble. At this moment, the 4 heads on Jiao Ying's body swayed and opened their mouths. Suddenly, turbid torrents gushed out and poured down towards the 3 ferocious beasts. The 4 torrents were like the Milky Way pouring down from the 9 heavens with a terrifying aura. The 4 torrents clashed continuously with the power of the Samadhi Dao fire. This was a confrontation between water and fire. Water and fire countered each other. However, whether the water could extinguish the fire or the fire could incinerate the water depended on which of the 2 powers was stronger. The 2 powers were in a stalemate. It would not have been a big deal if Extreme Fire and the Jiao Ying were to fight directly. However, the battlefield between the Samadhi Dao fire and the 4 torrents was on the 3 conjoint body ferocious beasts. The 3 conjoint body ferocious beasts were already in excruciating pain after enduring a single Samadhi Dao fire. Now that they were corroded by the torrents, it did not take long for them to die in the battle between fire and water without any corpses left. Outsider! The Jiao Ying shrieked, "You've angered me!" Endless rage shone on the 9 heads of the Jiao Ying. All of a sudden, the 9 heads moved at the same time. They opened their mouths and spat out flames. Torrents interweaved into a fire and water net that emitted a destructive aura and enveloped Extreme Fire. These flames also carried a nauseating stench. "Be careful, the flames are poisonous," Nianqi reminded hurriedly. Extreme Fire realized it quickly as well. With a grim expression, he channeled his destiny dermic weapon and blocked in front of him. At the same time, Extreme Fire conjured hand seals repeatedly to conjure dermic arts that struck the fire and water net, wanting to tear a hole in it. However, the fire and water net was the Jiao Ying's innate divine power. If the 2 of them were of the same cultivation realm, Extreme Fire could definitely tear the net apart. However, the Jiao Ying was a half-martial ancestor expert now and his dermic powers were boundless and endless. The fire and water net could not be torn apart. Just as the fire and water net was about to envelop them, Nianqi arrived beside Extreme Fire in a flash after killing a conjoint body ferocious beast. Boom! Nianqi channeled his bloodline and released his bloodline phenomenon. A gigantic pyramid appeared behind her. It was ancient and mysterious and countless mortals knelt beneath it, praying devoutly. Nianqi stood at the top of the pyramid like a god of that world. When he saw that, the white-robed man's eyes shone brightly as he nodded secretly. "Senior, you defend against the other Kunlun beings. I'll deal with this Jiao Ying," Nianqi said quickly. Shing! The pyramid soared into the skies and tore the fire and water net apart instantly, suppressing the Jiao Ying. "Ah!" The Jiao Ying shrieked, "How dare you!" The pyramid descended and crushed both of the Jiao Ying's heads. Flesh and blood splattered and brains flowed all over the ground in a shocking manner. However, in the blink of an eye, the 2 heads of the Jiao Ying grew back. Although conjoint body mighty figures could regrow severed limbs, their heads would definitely not be able to grow back. However, this Jiao Ying was different. The Jiao Ying had 9 heads and would not die even if 8 of them fell. His essence spirit could move freely among the 9 heads. As long as a single head was not destroyed, he would not die. Nian Qi controlled the gigantic and majestic pyramid and strode forward. The pyramid descended once more. At the same time, Nian Qi used both his limbs to conjure dermic arts and secret skills. In the blink of an eye, a torrential attack descended on the Jiao Ying. Poof! Poof! The Jiao Ying's heads exploded one after another. However, they could regrow before long. In the most dangerous battle between the two sides, the Jiao Ying even lost 8 of its heads and was almost killed by Nian Qi on the spot. As a half-martial ancestor, the Jiao Ying was completely suppressed by Nian Qi. On the other side, there were only 7 conjoint body ferocious beasts left. Even if those ferocious beasts joined forces, they could not defend against Extreme Fire's attacks. Divine Envoy, please help. The Jiao Ying could not hold on any longer and cried for help. Fu. The white-robed man at the side smiled gently and extended his palm slowly. His blood qi surged and a blazing golden light shone as he said indifferently, "It's time to end this." Chapter 1498. Nian Qi's expression changed when she saw the golden blood qi surging on the white-robed man's arm. She exclaimed, "Prowess!" She was extremely familiar with that bloodline. This white-robed man was definitely a Protoss. However, how could there be a Protoss in the Kunlun ruins? The Kunlun ruins had the existence of the Kunlun barrier. If it sensed that a Protoss had barged in, it would become extremely violent. Nian Qi was almost killed by the power of the Kunlun barrier. In other words, this white-robed man could not have entered from the outside. Could this person be a descendant of the Protoss who survived the Primordial War? However, if that was the case, why would the Kunlun race be so respectful to this person and address him as Lord Divine Envoy? Furthermore, for some reason, Nian Qi felt that this person was different from some of the Protoss she had seen before. As the white-robed man's blood qi surged, his originally black hair turned golden. Half-martial ancestor. This white-robed man was actually a half-martial ancestor. The white-robed man did not have any storage bags hanging on his body. However, a gigantic sword suddenly appeared in his hand. It was a two-handed gigantic sword. Such a weapon was rather rare in the cultivation world. Generally speaking, the swords of sword cultivators were known for their elegance and agility. Only Protoss would use such a gigantic sword. "Little girl, you're still too inexperienced." The white-robed man smiled and strode forward. He gripped the gigantic sword with both hands and raised it high. His blood qi surged and a dazzling golden light burst forth from the sword. Under the illumination of the golden light, the Protoss was like a true god, insufferably arrogant. Extreme Fire's heart skipped a beat. In front of this person, he even had the thought that he was unstoppable and undefeatable. Nian Qi's expression was grim as she controlled the pyramid behind her to crash towards the white-robed man. Slash! The white-robed man shouted. Holding the sword with both hands, the gigantic sword shone with a golden light as it slashed down at the incoming pyramid. Boom! An earth-shattering boom rang out. The entire secret room shook violently. Dust rustled down, and smoke billowed. Everyone's vision became somewhat blurry. Kakaka! Cracks began to appear on the mysterious and majestic pyramid. They grew larger and larger until they covered its entire body. With a loud bang, the pyramid collapsed and turned into nothingness. Nian Qi's bloodline phenomenon was cleaved apart by the white-robed man's sword. Nian Qi's body swayed, and a trace of blood spilled out from the corner of his mouth. However, her eyes were still filled with fighting spirit. Nian Qi's figure flashed, leaving behind a series of afterimages. His speed was extremely fast as he pounced towards the white-robed man. "You want to fight in close combat?" The corners of the white-robed man's mouth curled up slightly. He didn't care at all as he swung the greatsword with both hands. His swordsmanship was wide open, but there were almost no flaws. His attacks were ferocious. Nian Qi's body movements were graceful and abnormally agile. He constantly circled around the white-robed man, looking for an opportunity. There were way too many cultivation techniques and secret skills on Misty Peak. Nianqi had also cultivated many movement techniques and escape techniques. He integrated them into his comprehension and made use of the Protoss's bloodline and physique to cultivate a movement technique that was suitable for him. The white-robed man swung his great sword with unparalleled strength. However, he couldn't even touch Nianqi's sleeves. Nianqi was still tense. That was because she knew that there was a high chance that she would be killed by the white-robed man on the spot if she made a single mistake. She couldn't withstand the white-robed man's strength at all. However, the white-robed man was calm and composed without any hint of anxiety in his eyes. All of a sudden, perhaps because he was tired from swinging his sword for a long time, a fleeting opening appeared on the white-robed man's chest. Without hesitation, Nianqi's eyes shone brightly as he strode forward and punched viciously. Bang! The punch landed squarely on the white-robed man's chest. However, Nianqi's expression changed starkly. Her fist did not seem to have landed on a body of flesh, but a body of steel. Swish! The white robe on the man's body instantly exploded, revealing a tall and strong body covered in shining golden armor. The armor looked extremely heavy and was engraved with mysterious and complex patterns that shone with golden light. Nianqi's punch landed squarely on the heavy golden armor. This opening was deliberately left to her by the Protoss. "You've been tricked." The Protoss smiled and also punched Nianqi squarely in the chest. Nianqi's body was instantly sent flying. While still in midair, she spat out a large mouthful of blood. Her face was pale and she looked dispirited. All the blood in her body had been scattered. With a bang, Nianqi fell heavily to the ground. She felt as if all the bones in her body were about to break. A layer of cold sweat instantly appeared on her face. "You should know that I've already held back." The Protoss walked slowly toward Nianqi and smiled. "If I hadn't punched but used my sword just now, you would already be a corpse. On account of your talent and the fact that half of the Protoss bloodline flows in your body, I can take you in as my servant. Are you willing?" Nianqi's gaze was cold and she did not say a word. She knew very well that the Protoss had indeed held back just now. However, if he wanted her to submit, she would never agree. Seeing that Nianqi was unwilling to speak, the Protoss frowned slightly and said, "You have to understand that I'm giving you a chance to live." Then, the Protoss looked at Extreme Fire on the other side and said indifferently, "Like this person, only death awaits him." At this moment, Extreme Fire rushed out of the encirclement of several Kunlun race mighty figures and threw the crimson cauldron in his hand toward the Protoss. The wind howled. The Protoss had a mocking expression. Without even looking, he raised his sword with both hands and slashed down. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere. The crimson cauldron was actually slashed back by the Protoss's sword and crashed toward Extreme Fire at an even faster speed. At the same time, the surrounding Kunlun race mighty figures also took the opportunity to attack. Extreme Fire could not clone himself and several wounds appeared on his body instantly. In the end, Extreme Fire was even hit by his own Destiny Dermic artifact. Then, he slammed heavily into the wall of the secret chamber behind him and slid down slowly. Cracks began to appear on the walls. It was clear how terrifying the power that had erupted was. "And, how dare you attack me?" The divine race male gave a cold laugh and prepared to step forward to kill Extreme Fire thoroughly. Ah! At this moment, a loud roar sounded from the entrance of the tunnel on the other end of the secret chamber, as though it contained torrential anger. The Protoss frowned slightly. "There's someone else?" In the blink of an eye, a figure appeared at the other end of the tunnel. The cultivator was dressed in green robes and had black hair. He had delicate features and a sharp gaze as he surveyed his surroundings. The few Kunlun race mighty figures did not even dare to meet his gaze and instinctively avoided it. "Master, are you all right?" When the green-robed cultivator saw Extreme Fire slumped in a corner, he hurried forward and fed him a few elixirs. The Protoss had a mocking expression and could not help but scoff. He thought that it was some powerful figure. To think that it was that person's disciple. If even his master was suppressed by him easily, there was nothing to fear about a mere disciple. Chapter 1499. Zimo, you're out. Extreme Fire smiled. I'm fine. I'll be fine after resting for a while. Be careful, this person is a half-martial ancestor Protoss. He's not weak. Yes, Su Zimo nodded. Also, Extreme Fire continued, this should be a mystic realm passageway that Fairy Ling long opened up. It can pass through the Kunlun barrier and connect Tianhuang mainland to the Kunlun ruins. These people have just found out about the existence of this mystic realm passageway. Since they've already attacked, we can't let them leave alive. Although Extreme Fire and the others did not know the meaning and purpose of Fairy Ling long opening up this mystic realm, they believed that she must have a deeper meaning behind her actions. Furthermore, if these people were allowed to escape, they would definitely bring about even greater trouble. The only way to kill all the Kunlun beings here was to remove the firewood from under the cauldron and solve the problem once and for all. Fufu. At the side, Jiao Ying had already recovered from his stupor and his injuries were mostly healed. When he heard that, he could not help but sneer. You're only at the late-stage conjoint body realm and you want to kill all of us? After absorbing and refining the huge chunk of worry-free wood, Su Zimo's cultivation had already reached the mid-stage conjoint body realm and increased by 2 minor realms. If he were to cultivate normally, it would be impossible without hundreds or thousands of years. The power contained within the worry-free wood was way too pure and massive. It was compatible with Su Zimo's Qinglian's true body. Qinglian's true body could refine and absorb the power of the worry-free wood perfectly. Protoss? Su Zimo's gaze landed on the Protoss not far away and he frowned slightly. How could there be Protoss in the Kunlun ruins? At that moment, Nian Qi struggled to stand up as well and returned to Su Zimo's side. He bowed slightly and said, "Young master, you're the disciple of that ant?" The Protoss looked at Su Zimo and smiled confidently. "I only used a single sword strike to suppress your master. I should be able to suppress you with a single finger. Is that so?" Su Zimo's face was expressionless as he walked towards the male Protoss. "You can try." As a Protoss and a half-progenitor, the male Protoss didn't take Su Zimo seriously at all. Sure enough, as he said, he stretched out a finger and pressed it down on Su Zimo. Although it was only a finger, the finger was surging with golden qi and blood. It was like a stone pillar that reached the heavens. Its aura was shocking as it pressed down on Su Zimo. Su Zimo's expression was calm. Under the suppression of this finger, there was no trace of panic in his eyes. He didn't even try to dodge. Seeing that the finger was about to touch his head, Lin Fan's eyes widened. Su Zimo suddenly attacked. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo's palm grabbed the Protoss's finger. The male Protoss's power was blocked, and he couldn't suppress it. His heart trembled and he wanted to pull out his finger. However, his finger was tightly gripped by Su Zimo, and it couldn't move at all. It was impossible for him to pull out even if he wanted to. At this moment, a horrifying sound rang out. The male Protoss's eyes widened, and his expression changed drastically. His eyes were filled with pain. The male Protoss finally couldn't bear it and let out a sharp scream. Su Zimo actually broke the male Protoss's finger. The male Protoss frantically retreated, but Su Zimo didn't let go of his finger at all. Blood gushed out. Under the tearing of the two forces, the finger was directly torn off. "And how dare you injure my divine body?" The male Protoss was furious as he roared. It was just a broken finger. In the blink of an eye, it had already grown back. However, the 10 fingers were connected to the heart. The pain of a broken finger was unbearable. Furthermore, the male Protoss didn't expect that someone would be able to injure him. Someone actually dared to injure him. What kind of lousy divine body is this? To think that it's so weak. Su Zimo sneered and didn't stop in his tracks. He pressed forward and released an extremely terrifying pressure. Light slash. The male Protoss gripped his sword with both hands. His blood chi surged and the sound of waves erupted as he slashed down fiercely at Su Zimo. The power released by that slash was way too strong. The sword shone with a resplendent and dazzling light. Just now, It was this slash that broke Nianqi's bloodline phenomenon and severely injured Extreme Fire. Humph! Against this monstrous and ferocious sword, Su Zimo did not dodge or avoid. Instead, he reached out and grabbed the golden gigantic sword. "You're courting death." The male Protoss had a cold expression. The green-robed man was courting death by trying to use his body to defend against his half-martial ancestor dermic weapon. He was confident that he could slice the green-robed man into two with that slash. Bang! Before he could finish his thought, his golden gigantic sword had already slashed Su Zimo's palm. The scene he imagined did not happen. Su Zimo was not sliced into two, and even his palm was intact. After absorbing and refining the sorrowless wood, not only did her cultivation realm increase, Qinglian's true body was also growing rapidly and becoming stronger. The surrounding mighty figures of the Kunlun race, 9 Neonate and everyone else widened their eyes in disbelief and their jaws nearly dropped to the ground. How is that possible? The God Clan man was greatly shaken as he cried out in surprise. His slash was blocked by the green-robed man's body. Even his divine body did not dare to defend against the sharpness of a half-martial ancestor dermic weapon. What exactly was this person's body made of? Su Zimo sneered. "Do you think you can kill me with that?" Su Zimo took advantage of the moment when the male Protoss was stunned to stride forward. With a flip of his palm, he pressed down on the male Protoss's head. The palm seemed to have transformed into a gigantic seal in midair with a majestic aura that was unstoppable. The male Protoss was shocked. He abandoned the gigantic sword in his hand immediately and retreated. At the same time, he tilted his head back with all his might to avoid the gigantic seal. Boom! Although the male Protoss's face avoided the gigantic seal in midair, the gigantic seal still smashed heavily on his chest. It smashed him into the ground, creating a gigantic pit. Crack, 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 crack. Cracks appeared on the golden armor on the male Protoss's body, and it turned into a pile of fragments that scattered. The male Protoss's face was pale. If not for the protection of the armor, Su Zimo's palm strike would have been enough to shatter his body into pieces. Tut, tut, tut. Su Zimo's footsteps sounded. To the male Protoss, it sounded like the sound of death. He had never thought that he would encounter such a terrifying and powerful cultivator here. Right now, he only wanted to escape from this place and tell his clansmen about what happened today. With such a powerful existence in the Kunlun ruins, who knew what kind of variables would occur? But the male Protoss circulated his blood chi again and leaped up from the deep pit. Before he could escape, his vision blurred and a figure had already arrived before him. Su Zimo did not waste any time talking to him, nor did he give him a chance to catch his breath. With a flip of his hand, he pressed down with another palm strike. Chapter 1500. The armor on the male Protoss's body was shattered. He had just escaped from the deep pit and was already in a sorry state. He no longer had the confidence and elegance that he had just now. There was only panic and fear left in his eyes. Swoosh! The male Protoss did not move at all. Suddenly, a huge golden shield appeared in his hand and stood in front of him. Su Zimo's eyes narrowed slightly. The male Protoss did not have a storage bag on him. He saw clearly that this huge golden shield was taken out from a ring on the male Protoss's finger. The use of this ring was probably similar to the storage bag on his waist. Su Zimo did not think too much and continued to slap down with his palm. Boom! Su Zimo's palm landed on the golden shield and there was a loud explosion. Although this golden shield was intact, Su Zimo's palm had suppressed both the shield and the male Protoss. The male Protoss's body fell heavily to the ground. This time, without the protection of the golden armor, the male Protoss's organs were shaken violently and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Su Zimo nodded slightly and said, "You're quite capable to be able to take two of my palms." This sentence was extremely harsh to the male Protoss. As a half-martial ancestor Protoss, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? The male Protoss slowly stood up and wanted to pick up the huge golden shield beside him again. However, he realized that the huge shield had already dimmed. The mysterious runes on it had been completely destroyed by Su Zimo. This was because there was a clear palm print in the middle of the huge shield, covering all the runes below. Who exactly are you? The male Protoss's face darkened as he gritted his teeth and said, Are you from some forbidden race on Tianhuang mainland? I'm not a forbidden race. I'm a human. Su Zimo said indifferently. Impossible. The male Protoss shouted, The human race is the weakest race, the bottom of the food chain. How can you be a human? I'm Araki Takashi. Su Zimo added. Impossible, absolutely impossible. The male Protoss didn't have much of a reaction when he heard the name Araki Takashi. He just kept shaking his head. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and stepped forward again. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the head of the male Protoss. It was too strange that traces of the Protoss had appeared in the Kunlun ruins. Furthermore, this Protoss had never heard of his name before, so there was no way he was from Tianhuang. Su Zimo wanted to capture the Protoss's primordial spirit and search his soul. The male Protoss sensed danger and suddenly shouted, What are you waiting for? Attack together. Only then can we leave this place alive. It was only then that Jiao Ying and the rest of the Kunlun tribe reacted. After all, just now, Su Zimo had only attacked twice, and he had beaten the male Protoss so badly that he could not fight back at all. Araki Takashi. The male Protoss roared as his blood essence rose. He shouted, You want to suppress me? Impossible. A huge and magnificent ancient building appeared behind the male Protoss. It was golden and filled with a mysterious and strange aura. It was the Protoss's bloodline phenomenon. Countless living beings were kneeling and praying under the pyramid with pious expressions. The male Protoss stood at the top of the pyramid and opened his arms. It was as if endless power was surging into his body. His injuries were healing rapidly, and his aura was rising. At the same time, Jiao Ying and the remaining 6 Kunlun tribe mighty figures surrounded him and attacked. Jiao Ying and the rest realized how powerful Su Zimo was and did not dare to hold back. Dharma spells, secret skills, and Dharma artifacts covered the sky and covered the earth. Light of the Firefly. Su Zimo's voice sounded, containing a supreme will. How dare you compete with the bright moon? After saying that, Su Zimo's figure had completely disappeared. What replaced him was a jade-green Qinglian that shot into the sky. It was jade-like and its lotus petals bloomed slowly, emitting rays of light. This is... Jiao Ying and the other mighty figures of the Kunlun tribe were shocked. The Qinglian swayed gently. It was as if a pebble had been dropped into a calm lake, causing ripples that could be seen with the naked eye. The Dharma spells in midair were all destroyed. Some of the Khanate mighty figures' Dharma artifacts did not even get close to the Qinglian before their light dimmed rapidly and they fell from midair. As for the perfect mighty figures' Dharma artifacts and even lower Dharma artifacts, they shattered and were destroyed on the spot. The Qinglian swayed again. Yet another ripple spread out. The 6 Kunlun tribe mighty figures could not dodge at all and were enveloped by the ripple, as though they were frozen in midair. Wherever the ripples passed, the mortal bodies of the Kunlun race's mighty figures exploded into clouds of blood mist. The essence spirits of the 6 Kunlun tribe mighty figures were devoured silently by the ripple created by the creation Qinglian and turned into nothingness. The 6 Kunlun tribe mighty figures were all dead without a corpse. Jiao Ying realized that something was amiss and retreated first. Even so, 8 of his 9 heads had been shattered, and he had almost lost his life here. Jiao Ying retreated rapidly and fled into the distance. Right then, the creation Qinglian swayed for the 3rd time. Rumble! The pyramid beneath the Protoss male collapsed instantly and countless gravel rolled down, burying the living beings that were kneeling and praying below. The Protoss male widened his eyes and cracks appeared on his body as well. It was a clash between his bloodline phenomenons. His bloodline phenomenons were completely defeated. Su Zimo's figure appeared again and arrived beside the Protoss male in the blink of an eye. He slapped the Protoss male's head and imprisoned his essence spirit. Following that, Su Zimo's figure flashed and chased after the fleeing Jiao Ying. Young master, be careful. This Jiao Ying has 9 heads. You have to see all 9 heads come down at the same time for this ferocious beast to die. Nian Qi reminded hurriedly. Su Zimo's expression was calm and he was not surprised. He said casually, "That's nothing." Su Zimo grabbed the essence spirit of the Protoss male with one hand and slashed gently in the direction of Jiao Ying with the other hand. After slashing, Su Zimo had already turned around and walked back without even looking at Jiao Ying. The fleeing Jiao Ying sensed danger and could not help but turn around to take a look. That glance was filled with incomparably blazing sword beams. All he could see was a vast expanse of whiteness. He had no idea how many streaks of sword chi were coming at him from all directions. Jiao Ying's face was filled with despair. There was no way to avoid it. Even if he had 90 heads, it would not be enough to kill him, let alone 9. The sound of sword chi piercing flesh could be heard and a blood mist filled the air. In the blink of an eye, Jiao Ying had already vanished, leaving behind a pile of flesh and blood that was minced by the heaven-slaying sword chi. Chapter 1501. If you dare to kill me, all of you will die. The essence spirit of the male Protoss roared as it was trapped in Su Zimo's palm. Su Zimo's expression was cold and he was unmoved. Streams of fiend chi spread out from the ball of light in his palm and coiled around the male Protoss's essence spirit rapidly, beginning a soul search. The male Protoss had a pained expression as his essence spirit curled up and trembled continuously. Scenes surged into Su Zimo's mind one after another. Su Zimo gradually frowned. Due to the interference of a mysterious power, the scenes were a little blurry. However, all the environments in the man's memories were unfamiliar to Su Zimo. There were obscure words, strange buildings and strange languages. Everything was unfamiliar and did not fit in with Su Zimo's understanding of the past. Of course, Tianhuang mainland was vast and filled with all sorts of strange things. There were also many regions that Su Zimo had never set foot in before. It was not surprising that there would be such scenes in some regions. Before long, the essence spirit of the male Protoss exploded. The soul search failed. The entire process was extremely short and Su Zimo did not obtain any useful information. Nian Qi and Extreme Fire walked over as well. Both of them were conjoint body mighty figures. Although they were severely injured just now, they were able to move freely after resting for a while. "How was it? Did you get anything?" Extreme Fire asked. Su Zimo shook his head and said in a deep voice, "The background of this Protoss is a little strange. I can't be sure yet, but he shouldn't be from Tianhuang mainland." "Young Master, Senior Extreme Fire, look over here." Right then, Nian Qi walked to the edge of a wall not far away and suddenly shouted. Su Zimo and Extreme Fire walked over and looked up. There were many words on the wall. However, they were covered by dust and spider webs and could not be seen clearly. Su Zimo gently waved his robe. His spiritual energy surged and swept away the dust on the robe, revealing a graceful handwriting. These rows of words were extremely neat. There were only 4 words in the first row. "I am Ling Long." These words were left behind by Fairy Ling Long. Su Zimo's mind shook, and he hurriedly continued reading. After a long time, the 3 of them finished reading the messages on the wall. They looked at each other and sighed with emotion. "Fairy Ling Long, you've really put a lot of thought into this." Nian Qi sighed. Extreme Fire also nodded and said, "I'm afraid that only such a woman is worthy of the ancient human emperor." It's no wonder Fairy Ling Long's name was passed down through the ages even though she wasn't conferred the title of emperor. Through Fairy Ling Long's message, Su Zimo and the others finally understood the origin of this secret realm. It turned out that when the ancient war broke out, the human race retreated in defeat. At that time, the human emperor had yet to reach the peak and could not suppress the emperors of the primordial races. Under the attacks of the primordial races, the experts of the human race suffered heavy casualties. In order to help the ancient emperors heal, Fairy Ling Long went to search for a primordial divine herb and came to Kunlun ruins alone. There was a Kunlun barrier in Kunlun ruins. With her powerful perception, Fairy Linglong sensed a flaw in the barrier and made use of it to open up a passage between Kunlun ruins and Tianhuang mainland. That was the embryonic form of this secret realm. The reason why Fairy Linglong opened up this secret realm was not just to enter Kunlun ruins. Her true goal was to leave a way out for the human race. If the human race was defeated in the ancient war, Kunlun ruins would be their final retreat. That was because this was the forbidden ground of the primordial races. As long as they retreated here, they could at least preserve the bloodline of the human race and pass down their civilization. They would not be completely destroyed by the primordial races. In this secret realm, a large number of dermic weapons, cultivation techniques, secret skills and treasures were prepared for the humans who retreated to Kunlun ruins. If the human race really reached that stage, their vitality would definitely be greatly damaged and less than a tenth of them would survive. Countless inheritances would be severed. As for these dermic weapons, cultivation techniques, secret skills and treasures, they could protect the human race and pass down their civilization. They could accumulate strength and wait for an opportunity to rise again. Fairy Linglong did not choose to carry those treasures with her. That was because she knew that she would definitely not retreat in the ancient war. She would fight to the end with the human emperor and the ancient emperors. Even if she had to bleed to the last drop of her blood, she would protect the dignity of the human race and die without regrets. When Fairy Linglong left this place, she was already prepared to die. The handwriting here was equivalent to Fairy Linglong's last words. At that point, Su Zimo and the other two were moved and felt touched and admiration deep in their hearts. The three of them bowed deeply to the wall in unison. They were bowing to the ancient emperors. They were bowing to the ancient human emperor. They were bowing to Fairy Linglong. They were paying their respects to the countless predecessors who had fallen in the primordial war. Perhaps they were nameless or had no surname. Perhaps they did not leave behind any records. However, it was their passion, their corpses and their unyielding spirit that created the glory of the human race throughout history. Su Zimo and the other two stood up and exchanged glances with a smile. At the very least, the worst outcome of the ancient war did not happen. The rise of the human emperor was invincible and suppressed the various primordial races. Eventually, he led the human race to victory in the ancient war. Fairy Linglong's move was not used, and that was the reason why it was sealed until now. On the wall, Fairy Linglong left behind a few lines of words behind those words. I stayed in Kunlun ruins for a few days and discovered some clues about the primordial war. However, time was tight and I couldn't divert my attention to investigate. There seems to be more to the primordial war and it doesn't match the rumors. There were not many words, but they revealed important information. If she did not discover anything, Fairy Linglong would not have spouted nonsense or even left behind words to remind the future generations. Su Zimo and the other two frowned slightly in deep thought. The primordial war was too far away from the present. No one knew what happened back then, and the truth of the primordial war could only be known in Kunlun ruins. At the end of those words, there was a mention of Night Spirit. Night Spirit was a taboo and naturally could not be hidden from Fairy Linglong. Fairy Linglong's initial plan was to bring Night Spirit back to Tianhuang mainland and raise it to fight against the various primordial races. The reason why the Kunlun race that died in this mystic world was because Fairy Linglong took away Night Spirit was that they chased after her and were killed here. However, before Fairy Linglong left this place, she changed her mind at the last minute. Firstly, it would take a long time for Night Spirit to grow. At that time, the ancient war had already reached its most intense state and there was no time for Night Spirit to grow. Secondly, Fairy Linglong was worried as well. If she brought Night Spirit back to Tianhuang mainland, it would cause an unimaginable disaster and she would be the sinner of Tianhuang mainland. Fairy Linglong did not want to send Night Spirit back to Kunlun ruins either. After pondering for a long time, she left Night Spirit here and left it to fend for itself. Many years later, Night Spirit left this place with the help of the extreme fire and was born and grew in this era. Chapter 1502. What are the secrets of the primordial war? Extreme Fire looked at the wall and suddenly asked. Su Zimo smiled gently. Stop guessing. We'll only be able to unravel all the secrets after we enter Kunlun ruins. Let's go. Extreme Fire nodded and wanted to move right away. Su Zimo could not help but laugh. Master, you and Nian Qi have yet to recover from your injuries. It's better for you to rest here for a few days first. There's no rush. That's true, Extreme Fire smiled. We don't know what kind of situation we'll face after entering Kunlun ruins. We should prepare. Following that, Extreme Fire and Nian Qi recuperated in the secret chamber. Both of them were at the conjoint body realm and had powerful bloodlines. Nian Qi even possessed the bloodline of a Protoss, and his recovery speed was shocking. In less than 3 days, she had already recovered. On the 5th day, Extreme Fire recovered as well. Let's go, Extreme Fire called out. Su Zimo nodded and handed a golden ring to Nian Qi. This was taken from the finger of the Protoss. There's no reaction when I touched it with my dermic powers. Give it a try. Nian Qi received the ring and looked at it curiously before injecting dermic powers. There was still no reaction from the ring. Pondering for a moment, Nian Qi suddenly bit his fingertip and squeezed out a drop of blood, dripping it onto the ring. The drop of blood fused into the ring rapidly. Thereafter, Nian Qi was stunned and his eyes were filled with shock. What's wrong? Su Zimo asked. Nian Qi composed himself and said in a deep voice, There's an extremely huge space in this ring and it can store many things. It's not inferior to our storage bags. Su Zimo nodded. Just as I guessed, this should be a storage ring. However, only a Protoss can use it. Young Master, there are some books and weapons inside. With a thought, Nian Qi moved the books and weapons out. Extreme Fire casually picked up a book and skimmed through it. What is this writing? I've never seen it before. Extreme Fire frowned slightly. The words on these books were extremely unfamiliar. They were not written in the language of the demon race or the language of the human race. They were crooked and unrecognizable, as though they were heavenly books. The forging of those weapons was completely different from those of Tianhuang mainland as well. Su Zimo also shook his head and said, I don't understand. Let's put these things away first. Nian Qi obeyed and put the books and weapons back into the storage ring. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and said, Nian Qi, keep this storage ring as well. Don't expose it. They were about to enter the Kunlun ruins. They did not know who they would face and what kind of situation they would face. If there were other Protoss in the Kunlun ruins, they would be able to deduce that the male Protoss had died at their hands when they saw this storage ring. Su Zimo looked at the corpses of the few mighty figures of the Kunlun race on the ground in deep thought. What's wrong, Zimo? Extreme Fire asked. Su Zimo said, Did you guys notice that the Kunlun race that entered this time round is somewhat different from the ancient Kunlun race? Different? Extreme Fire frowned slightly. Nian Qi was puzzled as well. The ancient Kunlun race had long decayed and only corpses were left. Nothing could be seen at all, so how could they be different? Su Zimo pointed at the waists of the corpses of the Kunlun race beings that entered this time round. Look, these Kunlun race beings have gray ribbons around their waists. However, the ancient Kunlun race had purplish gold ribbons around their waists. That's indeed the case. But what does that prove? Extreme Fire asked with a frown. I don't know either. Su Zimo shook his head. Let's go and take a look at the Kunlun ruins. The three of them walked towards the other end of the secret realm. Before long, they arrived at the end of the secret realm. However, there was no path at the end. There was only an ice-cold wall. Su Zimo formed hand seals continuously with both hands and shot out streams of dermic powers into every corner. He shouted softly, Disperse! The wall before them gradually disappeared and a passageway that led to the outside world appeared. At the entrance of the secret realm and the Kunlun ruins, there was a formation set up by Fairy Ling Long. As time passed, a few formation cores shattered and the male Protoss discovered the flaws and cracked it. Over the past few days, Su Zimo had repaired the formation again. The foundation of the formation was still there and there was no need to carve formation patterns. Su Zimo only had to repair the formation core and the formation could operate again. In this way, This secret realm would not be discovered by anyone else. Su Zimo left the secret realm with Extreme Fire and Nian Qi and entered the Kunlun ruins. The moment the three of them entered the Kunlun ruins, they were shocked. What greeted them was an ancient aura. It was as though the three of them had reversed time and returned to the primordial era in an instant. Due to the existence of the Kunlun realm, this place was truly isolated from the world. Since ancient times, only Fairy Ling Long had come to the Kunlun ruins and left alive. This place preserved the most primitive things and traces of the primordial era. All of the buildings here were very different from the buildings of the present day. Of course, most of them had already been reduced to ruins. Su Zimo and the other two headed in one direction and walked slowly, surveying their surroundings. Everything they saw was ruins and corpses. All the buildings were built on top of the ruins. Even the vegetation was rooted in the ruins. Not long after, their expressions flickered as they saw another demon spirit fruit not far away. Nian Qi scanned his surroundings and did not discover any danger. Only then did he walk forward quickly and pluck the fiend spirit fruit, handing it to Su Zimo. Back then, the fiend spirit fruit at the periphery of the Kunlun ruins was given to Extreme Fire first. Naturally, this one was given to Su Zimo first. Take it. Su Zimo smiled gently. Nian Qi shook his head stubbornly and insisted. Su Zimo had no choice but to put away the fiend spirit fruit. The three of them did not walk far when they saw another fiend spirit fruit. The three of them had wandered around the periphery of the Kunlun ruins for a long time and fought countless vengeful spirits and ghosts, but they only obtained a single fiend spirit fruit. However, they had not walked far in the Kunlun ruins when they saw two in a row. With that, the three of them would possess the spirit fruit. With the existence of the fiend spirit fruit, the three of them could increase their success rate by 30% when they experienced the fire of the divine power tribulation when breaking through to the Mahayana realm. The fiend spirit fruit had long gone extinct in Tianhuang mainland. To think that the three of them would obtain three in the Kunlun ruins. The old storyteller was right. The Kunlun ruins was an unknown place. Although it was extremely dangerous, it also had great opportunities. No one knew how many treasures there would be here, and the fiend spirit fruit was only one of them. Su Zimo's heart surged with anticipation as well. Perhaps Qinglian's true body could grow rapidly here. The reason why the fiend spirit fruit was so common in the Kunlun ruins was not only because of the special environment here, but also because the people in the Kunlun ruins did not need it at all. That was because they could not step into the Mahayana realm. Although the fiend spirit fruit was a treasure, it was useless to them. Chapter 1503. The three of them continued forward. After walking for about an hour, they did not see a single Kunlun being. Strange, where did the Kunlun race go? Extreme Fire was puzzled. There's another fiend spirit fruit over there. Nian Qi scanned the area and caught sight of another fiend spirit fruit not far away. Pausing for a moment, Nian Qi continued, however, the three of us already have it. It's useless to eat more of such a universal treasure. It's fine, Su Zimo said, let's pluck it. We can bring it to some old friends in Tianhuang mainland when we leave this place. That's right. Extreme Fire nodded as well. No one fought for the fiend spirit fruit in Kunlun ruins. However, in Tianhuang mainland, the various major sects, factions and half-martial ancestors would fight for it. Nian Qi walked over quickly. Before long, Su Zimo's expression changed and he suddenly said, Nian Qi, come back. Nian Qi paused in his tracks and heard the warning in Su Zimo's tone. True enough. Not far away, dozens of figures sped over. The two people in the lead had powerful auras and were at the conjoint body realm. Behind them were some Dharma Daojun. Those people charged toward Su Zimo and the other two aggressively. In the blink of an eye, they arrived and surrounded the three of them with unfriendly expressions. If he was not wrong, they should be the Kunlun race. Su Zimo swept his gaze. The Kunlun race beings had gray ribbons tied around their waists. They should be from the same faction as the Kunlun race beings that entered the mystic realm a few days ago. Outsiders. A conjoint body mighty figure on the left had a cold expression and sharp gaze as he suddenly hollered. "We are indeed from Tianhuang mainland." Su Zimo nodded and did not hide anything. Be it their attire or aura, the three of them were too different from the Kunlun race that had lived here for eons and could not hide it at all. Outsiders, kill without mercy for trespassing into Kunlun ruins. The conjoint body mighty figure on the right waved his hand and ordered immediately. The surrounding Dharma Daojun gathered their Dharma spells and took out their Dharma artifacts, ready to attack. Su Zimo snorted and suddenly flicked his finger. Two bedazzling sword chi burst forth from his fingertips. White and murderous, they slashed towards the two conjoint body mighty figures. The two conjoint body mighty figures' expressions changed drastically. The sharpness of the heaven-slaying sword chi made the two of them shudder. The two conjoint body mighty figures dodged with all their might and retreated. However, they could not avoid the two heaven-slaying sword chi. Puchi. Blood gushed out. His two arms were thrown high up in the air, chopped off by the heaven-slaying sword chi. The most frightening thing was that the sharpness and destructive power of the heaven-slaying sword chi prevented the two conjoint body mighty figures from regrowing their severed limbs. The wound was bleeding non-stop. You wait. The two conjoint body mighty figures panicked and fled into the distance after leaving behind some threatening words, vanishing in the blink of an eye. "I'm Araki Takashi." Suddenly, Su Zimo said, "Don't forget to report my name when you return." The other Dharma Daojun had just conjured their dermic arts and were dumbfounded by what they saw before they could release them. The two conjoint body mighty figures were sent fleeing by two sword chi before they could attack. How could they dare to move? One of the Dharma Daojun's dermic weapons had just been sent out. Just as it was about to hit Su Zimo, the Dharma Daojun changed directions hurriedly as though his life depended on it, avoiding Su Zimo and summoning his dermic weapon back. Su Zimo glanced over slightly. The Dharma Daojun scattered in fright and disappeared before Su Zimo and the other two before long. Su Zimo did not move nor did he chase after them. Why did Zimo hold back and let them leave? Extreme Fire asked. If these people return, they'll definitely attract even stronger existences. If Su Zimo had attacked with his full strength, how could the two heaven-slaying sword chi have only severed two arms? It's fine, Su Zimo waved it off. There are divine powers forbidden zones in Kunlun ruins. Even the strongest person is only a half-martial ancestor. If they're only half-martial ancestors, they won't be able to threaten us. Although Su Zimo's tone was calm, it was filled with immense confidence. Up till this point of his cultivation, there were very few people who could truly fight against him in the same cultivation realm. Although the environment of Kunlun ruins was special and there were countless treasures, cultivation techniques and secret skills that could nurture many paragons and monster incarnates, Su Zimo was confident that he could suppress all paragons. Su Zimo continued, "Furthermore, we'll inevitably come into contact with the Kunlun race after coming to Kunlun ruins. This is an opportunity." Actually, Su Zimo had another thought. Night Spirit. Ever since the two of them parted after the battle in Heaven and Earth Valley, Night Spirit's whereabouts were unknown. However, if Night Spirit was still alive, there was a high chance that he was in Kunlun ruins. The reason why Su Zimo announced his Dao title earlier on was because he wanted to use the two conjoint body mighty figures to spread the news. If Night Spirit was in the Kunlun race, he would definitely know that he was here. The three of them continued forward. Not long after, several figures appeared not far away. This time round, there were only more than 10 figures, but their auras were much stronger. The leader was a half-martial ancestor expert. He had a head of gray hair and was skinny, but his demonic chi surged. The dozens of figures behind him were all conjoint body mighty figures. The two conjoint body mighty figures whose arms were severed by Su Zimo earlier on were in the middle as well. The arms of the two mighty figures had already recovered to their original state. It was clear that an expert had helped to erase the sword chi on their severed arms. The two of them had to use their dermic powers to regenerate their severed arms. "Who's Araki Takashi?" The gray-haired man in the lead approached and asked slowly. "Commander, it's him." One of the conjoint body mighty figures who escaped hurriedly stood out and pointed at Suzumo. "You're Araki Takashi?" The gray-haired man narrowed his eyes that shone with a faint light. No one knew what he was thinking. A moment later, the gray-haired man suddenly said, "Follow me. Master wants to see you." "Who's your master?" Suzumo asked. "Our master is naturally the master of Kunlun Ruins, the Lord of Kunlun." The gray-haired man said proudly, "Follow me. You'll know after you meet master." Suzumo's heart skipped a beat as he nodded to Extreme Fire and Nianchi. The gray-haired man led the way. Suzumo and the other two followed closely behind. Along the way, Suzumo was actually a little nervous and expectant. Given Night Spirit's capabilities, there was definitely hope for him to become the Lord of Kunlun. Could it be Night Spirit? Everyone advanced at an extremely fast speed. After walking for about 2 hours, they did not see many Kunlun race beings along the way. Suzumo frowned and asked, "There should be a huge number of Kunlun race beings. Why are there so few of you?" "That's because most of our clansmen have gone to eliminate the traitors," the gray-haired man said indifferently. Pausing for a moment, the gray-haired man continued, "After you meet master, be careful with your words. Say whatever you want. Otherwise, all 3 of you will die in his rage." Chapter 1504. Under the lead of the gray-haired man, Suzumo and the other 2 advanced. The group of mighty figures of the Kunlun race that followed him looked at the 3 of them with obvious hostility. They surrounded the 3 of them in the middle, as though they were afraid that they would escape. After a long time, a massive and majestic palace appeared before them. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers and was grand and luxurious. Every single brick and tile was made from the best materials and treasures. The architectural style of the palace was rather ancient as well. A group of patrolling Kunlun beings passed by everyone. When they saw the gray-haired man, they knelt on the ground with respectful expressions and shouted, "Greetings, Commander!" Yes, the gray-haired man nodded with a calm expression and imposing aura. He waved his hand and said, "Get up." Upon hearing that, the patrolling Kunlun beings stood up and left. The gray-haired man turned around and glanced at Suzumo and the other 2. He said coldly, "Remember, kneel and bow when you see the Lord of Kunlun." Extreme Fire revealed a disdainful expression when he heard that. Who was he? He was the top weapon refinement grandmaster in Tianhuang mainland, and countless conjoint body mighty figures came to beg him to refine weapons. He was a mighty figure who dominated a region with torrential combat strength. How could he kneel to anyone casually? "What Lord of Kunlun? You sure are arrogant." Extreme Fire sneered internally but did not say anything. Nianchi was expressionless. She only listened to Suzumo. If Suzumo asked her to kneel, she would kneel. Suzumo's expression was calm and one could not tell if he was happy or angry. The gray-haired man raised his brow slightly and sneered, "Don't blame me for reminding you guys that this is Kunlun Ruins. Kunlun Ruins has its own rules. I don't care what kind of powerful figures you guys are in Tianhuang mainland. Once you're in Kunlun Ruins, even a dragon has to lie down obediently. Anyone who doesn't abide by the rules in Kunlun Ruins will be killed without mercy." Suzumo remained silent and did not react to the gray-haired man's threat. He was neither afraid nor angry. Suzumo's thoughts were simple. If the Lord of Kunlun was the Night Spirit, then everything would be fine. Night Spirit naturally wouldn't ask him to kneel. If the Master of Kunlun was not the Night Spirit, in this world, no one could force him to kneel. Not even a Mahayana realm patriarch could do it. The gray-haired man continued to lead Suzumo and the others forward. They passed through many palaces, and a huge altar appeared in front of them. Around the altar stood countless living beings of different races. However, there were gray ribbons wrapped around each of their waists. Their cultivation levels were all different. At a glance, there were at least 10 million of them. Amongst them, there was no lack of conjoint body mighty figures and half-martial ancestors. These living beings were all from the Kunlun race. The great army formed by so many powerful creatures was disciplined and orderly. Killing intent surged. It was an extremely shocking sight. Even in Tianhuang mainland, such a scene had never happened before. One had to know that there were no more than 1 million cultivators in a super sect, including the Qi refinement warriors. There were so many Kunlun race beings that they could roughly be divided into 5 massive groups. They occupied different regions and surrounded the altar in the middle. Among them, there were 4 half-martial ancestor experts with terrifying auras standing at the front. They looked like they had noble statuses. In order to destroy the rebellion in Kunlun ruins this time round, Master gathered 10 armies. 5 of them are here. The other 5 are already fighting the traitors at the front. The 4 half-martial ancestors you see are the commanders of the 4 armies. Su Zimo swept his gaze. The position of the commander of the 5th army was empty. If he was not wrong, the gray-haired man beside him should be the commander of the 5th army. With so many powerful living beings gathered together, an incomparably powerful aura reverberated around the palace. If 10 million Kunlun race beings attacked at the same time, they could probably crush any conjoint body mighty figure or half-martial ancestor expert into pieces. Even Extreme Fire and Nian Qi were secretly shocked, and their expressions changed slightly when they saw such a majestic scene. Among the 3 of them, Su Zimo was the only one who had an indifferent expression the entire time. Of course, the most eye-catching thing was not the surrounding Kunlun army. It was the few people on the altar in the middle. In the middle of the altar was a throne made of gigantic bones. Every single bone was a dragon bone. Even after countless years, they still emitted a powerful dragon qi. That was a true dragon throne. There was a person sitting on the dragon throne. It was a bald burly man with a burly figure. He exuded a powerful might from head to toe. Even though he was sitting there casually, it was as though he was the master of the world. An army of 10 million listened to the orders of a single person. This is the Lord of Kunlun, the gray-haired man said proudly. A look of disappointment flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Initially, he thought that the Lord of Kunlun might be the Night Spirit. To think that it was a stranger. Although there were many living beings around the altar, he could not find the Night Spirit. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and looked towards the Lord of Kunlun. The Lord of Kunlun emitted an extremely evil aura, as though he was a gigantic abyss that could devour everything. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. The Lord of Kunlun was not human. However, he could not tell what the true form of the Lord of Kunlun was either. Behind the Lord of Kunlun stood 3 handsome men in white robes. Although they were disguised, Su Zimo recognized them immediately. The 3 of them were dressed exactly the same as the Protoss that died in his hands in the exquisite secret realm. Su Zimo was expressionless. By then, the gray-haired man had already arrived on the altar with Su Zimo and the other 2. Go Xian, you're back, the Lord of Kunlun smiled and said. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. The Lord of Kunlun's smile was so wide that it almost reached his ears. It was shockingly chilling. Greetings, Master. The gray-haired man named Go Xian knelt on the ground hurriedly and bowed respectfully. Su Zimo and the other 2 did not move at all. The Lord of Kunlun narrowed his gaze and the smile on his face vanished. Outsider, why aren't you kneeling when you see the Lord of Kunlun? Go Xian asked with a fierce gaze. Kneel, kneel, kneel. The millions of living beings below roared and their demonic qi surged into the skies with a massive might that shook the world. Even with Extreme Fire's strong temperament, he felt immense pressure at that moment. I don't have that habit. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he replied casually. A killing intent flashed through Go Xian's eyes as he looked at the Lord of Kunlun who was seated on the dragon throne instinctively. The Lord of Kunlun closed his eyes expressionlessly. Go Xian understood and leaped up from the ground with a menacing expression. His blood qi surged as he lunged toward Su Zimo. Since you're not kneeling, die. Go Xian's long hair was bloodshot and suddenly squirmed, turning into small gray snakes that bared their fangs and flicked their tongues, biting towards Su Zimo. Chapter 1505. Su Zimo's expression turned cold. If the Lord of Kunlun was not the Night Spirit, It meant that the commander before him had nothing to do with the night spirit. If that was the case, he had nothing to worry about. You want to kill me? Su Zimo reached out and grabbed Gou Xian's head. Every single strand of hair on Gou Xian's head was a gray venomous snake. They were densely packed and terrifying. There was no way to attack. You don't know what's good for you. Gou Xian could not help but sneer when he saw that Su Zimo dared to grab him with his body. However, his expression changed in the blink of an eye. Just as Su Zimo's palm was about to descend on his head, a series of extremely sharp sword chi burst forth from the center of his palm. Sword chi burst forth one after another and severed the gray snakes on his head instantly, causing blood to spray everywhere. Gou Xian's expression changed in shock as he retreated explosively, escaping from the sword chi. Gou Xian's blood chi surged and he transformed into his true form in the blink of an eye. It was a pure-blooded ferocious beast, Hook Snake. However, the moment his massive body appeared, Su Zimo had already arrived before him. His palm landed on Gou Xian's snake head and pressed it against the ground. Boom! Before Gou Xian could react, he was smashed onto the altar by Su Zimo. It was unknown what sort of universal treasure the altar was made of, but it was indestructible. When the hook snake's head smashed onto it, the altar was intact. However, the hook snake was smashed beyond recognition and even its skull was shattered. The Lord of Kunlun opened his eyes with a look of surprise. Those who could become the commanders of the 10 armies under him had to undergo heavy selection and only the strongest half-martial ancestors were qualified. Among the 10 commanders, although Gou Xian's combat strength was not the strongest, he was ranked in the top 5. Furthermore, the green-robed cultivator was only at the conjoint body realm. However, Gou Xian was a half-martial ancestor. The moment both sides exchanged blows, Gou Xian was defeated. An uproar could be heard from below the altar. In the hearts of the Kunlun race, the status of the commanders was second only to the Lord of Kunlun. None of them could be challenged or defeated. But who would have thought that their Lord Commander would actually be suppressed by an outsider in one move? It wasn't over yet. Gou Xuan wanted to struggle up, but Su Zimo did not give him a chance. He stepped forward and stomped down on Gou Xuan's head. Puchi! The entire altar trembled. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, Gou Xian, one of the 10 great commanders of the Kunlun race, had his head crushed by Su Zimo's foot. His Yuan spirit was extinguished, and his body and Tao vanished. Above and below the altar, it instantly fell into silence. No one had expected such an outcome. Gou Xian was a half-martial ancestor expert, but he did not even have the chance to unleash half of his battle prowess before he was stomped to death by Su Zimo. Gou Xuan never thought that Su Zimo would dare to make a move. What he did not expect was that Su Zimo would dare to kill him in front of everyone in the Kunlun ruins, right in front of the Lord of Kunlun. Outsider, you're courting death. Roar! The 4 commanders below reacted and reverted to their true forms one after another. They roared and descended on the altar, surrounding Su Zimo in the middle. Kill him! Kill him! The Kunlun race below gradually recovered from their shock. Their eyes surged with blood as they roared furiously. Clap, clap, clap. Right at that moment, someone clapped gently. The clamor from above and below the altar quickly disappeared. The eyes of the 4 great commanders also trembled. Fear flashed across their faces as they slowly withdrew. There was only one person in the Kunlun ruins who had such prestige. On the dragon throne, the Lord of Kunlun clapped and nodded slightly. Ruthless, ruthless, strong. I like it. After a pause, the Lord of Kunlun suddenly asked, "You're a Rocky Takashi?" "That's right," Su Zimo said. "How did you guys enter from Tianhuang mainland?" The Lord of Kunlun asked again. "There's a Kunlun barrier here. Normally speaking, you guys can't enter at all." Initially, we were indeed blocked outside. Later on, for some reason, a node suddenly appeared on this barrier. We seized the opportunity and entered the Kunlun ruins through this node. Su Zimo was already prepared and naturally would not tell him about the exquisite secret realm. The Lord of Kunlun was still expressionless as he asked, "Where is this node?" Su Zimo pointed in a random direction and said, "It's useless even if we search for it now. That node has long disappeared." "You're lying." The Lord of Kunlun's eyes suddenly shone with an evil light. The moment he said that, the Lord of Kunlun had already disappeared from the dragon throne. He was too fast. Before Extreme Fire and Nian Qi could react, an evil and terrifying aura had already descended in front of them. "Watch out!" Su Zimo hollered and pushed Extreme Fire and Nian Qi to the side with a casual sweep. His blood qi burst forth and the sound of a tsunami burst forth from his body. Bang, bang, bang. The moment Extreme Fire and Nian Qi stood still, the Lord of Kunlun and Su Zimo had already begun fighting. The two figures intersected on the altar and fought speed. In just a few breaths, both parties had exchanged at least 100 punches. The bloodline of the Lord of Kunlun was also channeled to the extent of tsunami blood. This Lord of Kunlun is very strong. Extreme Fire was secretly shocked. Although Su Zimo did not release his full strength, there were very few experts who could fight Su Zimo to this extent in melee combat. At the very least, he and Nian Qi were definitely not a match for the Lord of Kunlun. All of a sudden, the two of them exchanged another blow and separated upon contact. "Ha!" The Lord of Kunlun suddenly threw his head back and laughed. His mouth was wide open and almost reached the back of his head, revealing his ferocious intersecting fangs. It was terrifying. "Awesome, awesome." The Lord of Kunlun laughed loudly without any anger on his face. Su Zimo's expression was calm as he looked at the Lord of Kunlun quietly. "Raki Takashi, why have you come to Kunlun ruins?" the Lord of Kunlun asked. Su Zimo said, "I heard that there are many natural treasures here. We want to cultivate in Kunlun ruins for a period of time and use the treasures here to raise our cultivation." "Alright." The Lord of Kunlun said, "All the treasures in Kunlun ruins are under my control. If you need them, I can provide them all to you." Su Zimo's expression did not change as he asked, "What condition?" The Lord of Kunlun said slowly, "Goshuan is dead. You are the new commander of that army. I want you to follow me on an expedition to kill the traitors of Kunlun ruins." A commotion came from below the altar. No one expected that not only did the Lord of Kunlun not avenge Goshuan's death, he even promoted the outsider who killed Goshuan to the commander of the army. "I don't look at your body or background. I only look at your ability," the Lord of Kunlun said. "The position of commander belongs to those who are capable. Even if you're an outsider, I'll still put you in an important position." "Master, what about Commander Goshuan's enmity?" A Kunlun eminence could not help but step forward. "Are you dissatisfied with my decision?" The Lord of Kunlun glanced sideways. The Kunlun eminence trembled with fear and did not dare to continue. "Then you can die." The Lord of Kunlun suddenly opened his mouth and a huge suction force erupted. The Kunlun eminence could not resist it at all and was swallowed into the Lord of Kunlun's stomach. Chapter 1506. The entire place was silent. Just now, the clamor instantly quietened down. Crack, crack. The sound of bones being crushed came from the Lord of Kunlun's mouth. It was hair-raising. Scarlet blood slowly seeped out from the gaps between the Lord of Kunlun's teeth. The Lord of Kunlun licked his lips and swallowed the blood. All the Kunlun members looked at the Lord of Kunlun with fear in their eyes. Su Zimo remained calm. He was not interested in the position of commander or the elimination of traitors. However, on second thought, there was no harm in this. Furthermore, he could use this opportunity to understand more about Kunlun ruins and find out the truth of the primordial war. "Araki Takashi, what do you think?" the Lord of Kunlun asked slowly. "No problem." Su Zimo nodded and shifted his gaze to the few god race beings in white robes not far away. He asked in a seemingly casual manner, These are guests of Kunlun ruins. They are also the helpers I found." The Lord of Kunlun was extremely cautious and did not reveal the identity of these protoss. "Looks like these traitors in Kunlun ruins are quite troublesome. Even you can't suppress them, and you still have to find help?" Su Zimo raised his brows slightly. The Lord of Kunlun sneered and said, They're just small fries. It's just that the rebel leader is a little difficult to deal with. You'll know when you see him." After pausing for a moment, the Lord of Kunlun said with a faint smile, "Araki Takashi, it's not that I'm underestimating you, but if it's a one-on-one battle, you might not be a match for the rebel leader." "Then I'm looking forward to it," Su Zimo said indifferently. The Lord of Kunlun was obviously trying to provoke him. Although Su Zimo said that he was looking forward to it, he was unmoved. "When are we leaving?" Su Zimo asked. "Tomorrow morning, I'll lead the army and personally conquer the rebels." The Lord of Kunlun said, "Today, you can rest for a day. Men, bring Commander Araki Takashi to the palace to rest. Bring the most beautiful enchantress of our palace over and reward her to Commander Araki Takashi." The Lord of Kunlun waved his hand. "No need." Su Zimo waved his hand. The three of them followed a Kunlun race expert down the altar and walked towards a palace. Moments later, they disappeared from everyone's sight. This Araki Takashi has shown off his ability and is decisive in killing. He's not easy to control. Do you really plan to take him under your wing? A white-robed Protoss walked to the side of the Master of Kunlun and suddenly asked. The Lord of Kunlun chuckled softly and said, "This person's combat prowess isn't weak. It's a pity to kill him. Why don't we use him to deal with that beast? When this battle ends, it will naturally be the time of his death." The Lord of Kunlun licked his lips, greed in his eyes as he said, "I can smell an extremely powerful and fresh blood energy on him. This person's flesh and blood must be a great tonic. Be careful, don't bite." Another Protoss laughed. The Lord of Kunlun grinned and said, "Don't worry. Just now, I'm fighting with him, and I'm not using my full strength at all. Besides, don't we have everyone here? 3 outsiders can't do anything." A Protoss suddenly said, "I'm worried about something." The Lord of Kunlun looked over. This Protoss pondered and said, "That beast came back from Tianhuang, and so did these 3 outsiders. What if they know each other?" The Lord of Kunlun laughed loudly and said, "How can there be such a coincidence in the world? So what if they know each other? That beast can't hold on for much longer. This Araki Takashi isn't a fool. If he knows how to size up the situation, he'll know who to help." After a pause, the Lord of Kunlun's smile disappeared, and he said coldly, "Speaking of which, if he really has any ulterior motives, I'll swallow him alive immediately." In a palace in Kunlun ruins. Su Zimo sat cross-legged on a bed. He rubbed his glabella and fell into deep thought. Extreme Fire and Nian Chi searched around the palace. After confirming that there was no danger or abnormality, they returned to Su Zimo's side. Extreme Fire asked, "Zimo, are you really planning to help this Lord of Kunlun eliminate some traitor? I think this Lord of Kunlun is ferocious and bloodthirsty. He's not a good person." "I think so too." Nian Chi nodded and said, "This Lord of Kunlun is temperamental and can turn hostile and kill at any time. Now that he's invited you to become the commander, it's very likely that he'll turn around and deal with you after the battle ends." "Yes." Su Zimo nodded and said, "I've thought of what you're worried about. This Lord of Kunlun can rule the Kunlun race and intimidate the Kunlun ruins. He's not weak. When he fought me, he didn't use his full strength. Of course, I held back too. Let's follow and check out the situation first. We'll be on guard. When the time comes, we'll react accordingly." "All right, Zimo. Since you're prepared, I'm not worried anymore." Extreme Fire nodded. "Right." Su Zimo suddenly asked, "Can you guys sense what the main body of this Lord of Kunlun is?" Extreme Fire and Nian Chi shook their heads. To be able to intimidate everyone in the Kunlun ruins, his main body should not be an ordinary demon beast. Su Zimo murmured softly. "Could it be one of the primordial races?" Extreme Fire asked. Su Zimo shook his head. "No. Just now, I'm on the altar and used my spirit consciousness to check. There are no other primordial races in the Kunlun ruins. But the strange thing is, why would a Protoss appear in the Kunlun ruins?" Extreme Fire and Nian Chi were confused as well. Furthermore, the 3 Protoss did not know Su Zimo. In other words, the possibility of the 3 Protoss coming from Tianhuang mainland was not high. However, if they did not come from Tianhuang mainland, where did they come from? Su Zimo suddenly recalled what the storyteller old man had said. It seemed like in the primordial era, the Protoss was not one of the primordial 8 races. Primordial 8 races, Protoss, Kunlun, Taboo, Primordial War. Su Zimo had a feeling that the Protoss would definitely play an extremely important role in the Primordial War. The Protoss might be the key to unraveling the truth of the Primordial War. However, the power of the Lord of Kunlun is truly terrifying. Extreme Fireside, excluding the Mahayana patriarchs and emperors, the power of the Lord of Kunlun is even more terrifying than any super sect in Tianhuang mainland. After all, it's accumulated over time, Nianqi said. To think that there are still traitors in the Kunlun race. Extreme Fire continued, from the looks of it, the traitor army is not weak either. To think that they could cause the Lord of Kunlun to mobilize so many people. I wonder who the leader of the traitor army is to be able to fight against a half-martial ancestor like the Lord of Kunlun and make him so wary. The speaker did not mean it, but the listener did. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as a thought flashed through his mind. He thought of a possibility. Could it be? Chapter 1507. What's wrong? Extreme Fire and Nianqi could not help but ask when they saw the strange expression on Su Zimo's face. Su Zimo said slowly, "Night Spirit." What? Extreme Fire and Extreme Fire were shocked as they exclaimed. That was a bold guess. However, on second thought, it was not impossible. If Night Spirit was still alive, he would have searched for Su Zimo in Tianhuang mainland a long time ago. The most likely place for him to appear was in Kunlun ruins. That was because this piece of land was inextricably linked to Night Spirit. This was Night Spirit's home. The ancestors of Night Spirit were buried in this piece of land. Furthermore, given Night Spirit's combat strength, he would definitely not be unknown if he returned here. It was also very likely that Night Spirit would become an overlord and fight against the Lord of Kunlun. Then what are we waiting for? Nianqi said in a deep voice, "Let's kill our way out now and regroup with Night Spirit." There's no hurry, Su Zimo said with a calm expression. Firstly, this is only my guess and I haven't confirmed it yet. Secondly, even if the leader of the rebellion is truly Night Spirit, we're not in a hurry at this moment. Extreme Fire nodded as well. The Lord of Kunlun is going to lead an army personally tomorrow. This means that the situation over there should be a stalemate. Night Spirit should be able to hold on. If we stay here, we can control the Lord of Kunlun's every move. It's much more useful than charging out rashly now. There's no hurry. We'll know the truth tomorrow. Su Zimo said faintly. The 3 of them did not sleep for the entire night. The next morning, Su Zimo and the other 2 arrived at the altar early in the morning. The Kunlun army had not left. They guarded the place for the night and were ready to set off. About an hour later, the Lord of Kunlun and the 3 white-robed Protoss descended on the altar. My fellow clansmen. The Lord of Kunlun looked around and said loudly, "I've just received news that the rebels have been defeated. My Kunlun army has conquered the rebels' nest. Now, there are not many traitors left. They are defending the god-slaying canyon to the death." The Lord of Kunlun raised his arm and shouted, "Everyone, follow me to kill the traitors and flatten the canyon. Kill the traitors and flatten the canyon. Kill the traitors and flatten the canyon." The Kunlun race below let out a series of enraged roars. The Lord of Kunlun pressed his hands down and said, "Everyone, the guests I invited will also arrive at the Kunlun ruins today. At that time, we will join forces with them and launch a pincer attack. We will definitely be able to kill all the rebels in the god-slaughtering canyon." Kill, kill, kill. The Kunlun race army roared in anger. The Lord of Kunlun continued, "At that time, these guests will help us dispel Kunlun's barrier and we can leave this place and return to Tianhuang mainland. At that time, we'll be able to reach the Mahayana stage and learn new abilities. At that time, we'll be able to break free from the shackles of heaven and earth and extend our lifespans. At that time, we'll be able to dominate Tianhuang mainland and not be trapped in these ruins and be unknown. The Kunlun race below let out excited cries. One had to admit that the Lord of Kunlun's words were very infectious. However, right from the beginning, Su Zimo was expressionless. He was curious. Who were the guests the Lord of Kunlun was referring to? The Protoss? Why would the Protoss come to Kunlun ruins? Let's go. The Lord of Kunlun waved his hand. The Kunlun race army stood up one after another and boarded the gigantic spirit ships, sailing towards the west with a murderous aura. The Lord of Kunlun, the 3 Protoss, Su Zimo and the other 2, and the other 4 commanders were all on the largest and most imposing warship in the lead. Everyone stood on the deck of the ship, facing the wind. How do we differentiate between the traders and our Kunlun army? Su Zimo suddenly asked. It's extremely easy, the Lord of Kunlun smiled. The Kunlun race under my command have gray ribbons around their waists while the traders have purplish gold ribbons. You just have to remember to kill all living beings with purplish gold ribbons. Su Zimo nodded. Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo asked again, what's the background of this rebel leader? It seems like he's quite famous to be able to gather an army to fight against you. Fufu. The Lord of Kunlun sneered. He's just a beast that returned from the outside. He's merely relying on his bloodline and the reputation left behind by his ancestors. Those who follow him are all stubborn old fogies. A cold glint flashed through the depths of Su Zimo's eyes. He was almost certain that the so-called rebel leader was Night Spirit. At the thought of meeting Night Spirit, Su Zimo's heart burned with passion. To him, nothing was more important than Night Spirit being alive. The army sped forward at full speed. About 2 hours later, countless corpses could be seen piled up in the ruins of the wilderness. Blood flowed like rivers. All of them had died not long ago. Some of the corpses had purplish gold ribbons around their waists. However, some of them had gray ribbons. It could be deduced that this was the first battlefield where both sides fought. The battlefield extended into the distance. Corpses were everywhere and were getting denser. It was clear how tragic this battle was. Not long after, a huge palace could be seen not far ahead. The ceiling of the palace was already in shambles. Only the 4 walls were still standing. This is the nest of that rebel. The Lord of Kunlun pointed at the dilapidated palace and laughed. However, it has already been completely conquered by my army. Su Zimo's gaze narrowed slightly. On the walls of the dilapidated palace, he saw a series of lifelike drawings that seemed to be depicting something. What's that? Su Zimo pointed at the drawings on the walls and suddenly asked. The Lord of Kunlun swept his gaze casually and pursed his lips. It's just some old matters. Anything about the primordial war has long passed. Primordial war? Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he said, I'll go down and take a look. However, you're the commander of the new army. Don't stay for too long. We'll wait for you at the God-slaying canyon. The Lord of Kunlun instructed. He was not worried that Su Zimo and the other 2 would escape. In Kunlun ruins, no one could escape his control. In a flash, Su Zimo leaped down from the warship. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi followed closely behind. The warships and spirit vessels of the Kunlun army flew past the palace and sped towards the west. Su Zimo stepped on the corpses and ruins. He arrived at the entrance of the palace and paused for a moment. He had a premonition. This palace might very well reveal the true secret of the primordial war. Su Zimo took a deep breath and stepped into the palace. He looked at the first painting on the left. The first painting was very simple. It was a long and deep canyon. At the end of the canyon, there was a huge cave. The cave was surging with multicolored brilliance, changing unpredictably. There were a few figures walking out of this multicolored brilliance. Chapter 1508. This canyon. Nian Qi tilted his head slightly and murmured, I heard the Lord of Kunlun mention a canyon called the God-slaying Canyon just now. Could it be there? It's possible. Extreme Fire nodded. The gazes of the 3 of them fell on the few people who had walked out of the 5-colored cave. The characteristics of these people were too obvious. Blonde hair, blue eyes, tall figures, and handsome facial features. The three of them exchanged glances and could see the surprise in each other's eyes. The picture was very simple and ordinary. That was all it drew. However, there were 4 small words below the picture. Su Zimo subconsciously murmured, "Mainland of Gods." What does that mean? Extreme Fire and Nian Chi frowned slightly in confusion. Mainland of Gods, Su Zimo murmured again and walked forward to look at the second picture. The style of this picture changed abruptly. It was still in the same canyon, but it was dyed red with blood and many corpses were piled up in the canyon. And these corpses were all Protoss corpses. 2 ferocious and terrifying demon beasts stood on these Protoss corpses and were roaring in the direction of the colorful cave. Even though it was just a picture, the 3 of them could still sense the terrifying aura of these demon beasts. It was as if it could penetrate the walls and intimidate one's heart. Shock appeared in the eyes of the 3 of them. That was because this ferocious demon beast looked exactly the same as the night spirit's main body. However, its body was much larger. One was purple all over and had a slimmer figure. The other was golden all over and had an extremely strong body. That was the primordial taboo, Chi. Furthermore, there were 2 Chi. 1 male and 1 female. Extreme Fire was dumbfounded. After a while, he exclaimed, "Heavens, the taboo race actually had 2 Chi in the primordial era." At the end of the canyon, Protoss were still rushing out of the cave that shone with colorful light. One by one, the Protoss walked out of the cave and charged toward the 2 Chi. The picture froze. This painting was vivid and lifelike. As the 3 of them stood in front of this painting, it was as if they had gone back in time to the primordial era and personally witnessed this great battle. However, the eyes of the 3 of them were still filled with confusion. Su Zimo's gaze shifted downwards. At the bottom of the picture, there were still 4 words written in small font. Protoss invasion. Nian Chi's heart skipped a beat when she saw those words. Su Zimo and Extreme Fire were also stunned. The 2 of them subconsciously turned back to look at the first picture. Linking the 2 pictures together revealed a lot of information. After a brief silence, Extreme Fire tried asking, "Is the so-called godly mainland an existence like Tianhuang mainland?" "I think so." Su Zimo nodded. "The universe is vast and boundless. There are countless worlds like Tianhuang mainland." In other words, the Protoss was not a living being of Tianhuang mainland at all. He was a true outsider. If that was the case, many things could be explained. The bloodline and cultivation techniques of the Protoss were extremely different from the various races on Tianhuang mainland. After a Protoss's bloodline awakened, they would be born with a bloodline phenomenon. According to the records left behind by Fairy Ling Long, the primordial era consisted of the primordial 8 races and Protoss were not included. That was also the reason why Protoss had never appeared on Tianhuang mainland in the first place. The unfamiliar words in the storage bag of the Protoss that Su Zimo killed in Kunlun ruins were the words of the Protoss. The world in the memories of the Protoss should be the godly mainland. Extreme Fire looked at the cave that shone with 5-colored light in the second picture and said sternly, "From the looks of it, this cave should be the tunnel that connects Tianhuang mainland and the godly mainland. The Protoss can only enter Tianhuang mainland after passing through here." Su Zimo nodded and continued reading. In the third picture, it was still the same deep canyon. However, it had regained its calmness. Z2 and Golden Host snuggled together and sat above the canyon. There was an egg lying quietly in the bosom of the 2 shrews. On the other end of the canyon, some Protoss were leaving in a hurry. At the bottom of the third picture were the same words, "God Ho gives birth." Extreme Fire said in a deep voice, "From the looks of it, this Z2 should have given birth to a son." This Golden Ho took care of it day and night, and some Protoss seized the opportunity to pass through this canyon and enter Tianhuang mainland. Su Zimo nodded. Through these pictures, it was easy to connect the dots that happened in the primordial era. The 3 of them continued forward and looked at the fourth picture. Finally, the canyon was gone from the fourth picture. There were many living beings drawn on it. Apart from the Protoss, There were also dragons, the Kuan race, and the other primordial 8 races. Not only that, there were 2 even more terrifying demon beasts in the 4th picture whose auras were similar to gods. Forbidden Dragon Phoenix. Forbidden Kuan Peng. Many primordial races were gathered and some Protoss stood in the middle, as though they were saying something to the surrounding dragon phoenixes and Kuan Pengs. At the bottom of the 4th picture were the words, Protoss Instigation. At that point, the 3 of them could understand many things even without continuing to look. In the primordial era, perhaps gods were indeed bloodthirsty and arrogant and did not get along with the primordial 8 races, dragon phoenixes, and Kuan Pengs. However, the true cause of the primordial war was because of the Protoss. The invasion of the Protoss was the invasion of another civilization. If they could not defend against it, all civilizations in Tianhuang mainland would disappear and all races would be enslaved by the Protoss. The gods realized how terrifying this matter was and guarded Kunlun to stop the Protoss. However, because the gods gave birth, the Protoss took advantage of the situation to enter Tianhuang mainland and instigate the other 2 taboos, the primordial 8 races, to fight the gods. That was the reason for the earth-shaking primordial war. Nianqi's face was pale. No matter what, the bloodline of the Protoss flowed in her body after all. She had not expected that her ancestor would be the one who triggered the greatest catastrophe of Tianhuang mainland and indirectly killed the 3 taboos and countless races. The 5th picture. The scene had already changed to Kunlun mountain range. The male Golden Ho guarded the peak of Kunlun mountain range with 4 terrifying demon beasts with torrential demonic chi under its command. There were countless living beings and races under the command of the 4 demon beasts. Among the thousands of races, there were many races that stood on the side of the gods. Su Zimo's gaze focused slightly and landed on one of the 4 demon beasts under the command of the gods. That demon beast was unique. It had the body of a goat and the face of a human. Its eyes were under its armpits and its fangs were on its hands. Its entire body was grayish-black and its mouth was extremely terrifying. It grinned so widely that it almost reached the back of its head, as though it could devour billions of living beings. "I've got it." Su Zimo pointed at the demon beast and suddenly said, "The master of Kunlun should be the Tao. That Taotai should be the ancestor of the master of Kunlun." The Taotai was extremely greedy and ate everything. Rumor has it that if the Taotai were to be ruthless, they would even dare to eat the various primordial races. Furthermore, the Taotai had a huge appetite. Even primordial races such as the dragons and Kuan race could not compare to them in terms of appetite. Even in the primordial era, the Taoye's reputation was not inferior to the primordial races. It was only because there were few Taotai that they could be listed as one of the primordial races. Chapter 1509. In the 5th painting, the 10,000 races led by the Golden Ho were opposite an army led by the 2 great taboos, the Dragon Phoenix and Kuan Peng, supported by the primordial 8 races and many other living beings. Although it was merely a painting, the massive scene of the primordial war was displayed before the 3 of them clearly. The 3 of them were mighty figures that dominated a region. Su Zimo was the #1 monster incarnate of history and dominated his peers, suppressing half-martial ancestors. If the patriarch did not appear, it would be difficult for anyone to fight against him. However, the 3 of them felt as insignificant as dust in the midst of that majestic battlefield in front of that painting. They were way too ordinary in the face of such a battle. The moment the battle broke out, they might be drowned. But why didn't the deity explain? Nianqi still found it difficult to accept that fact. Perhaps it's disdain. Su Zimo looked at the figure in the painting that stood at the peak of Kunlun Mountain and raised its head fearlessly against the 2 great taboos, the Dragon Phoenix and Kuan Peng, and the army of the primordial 8 races. That painting was extremely lifelike. In fact, the pride, disdain, coldness, and killing intent in the Golden Ho's eyes were completely revealed. Extreme Fire shook his head as well. Now that the situation has developed to this extent, it's no longer something that can be explained with a few words. At the bottom of the 5th painting were the words Primordial War. Suddenly, Extreme Fire frowned. Strange, why isn't that Ziho in the painting? Given this painter's skills, there's no way he would make such a mistake. Su Zimo looked towards the sixth painting instinctively. The scene of the sixth painting returned to the god-slaying canyon. In the canyon, a demon beast with a torrential killing intent stood. Its back was facing Tianhuang mainland and it was roaring furiously in the direction of the five-colored cave. That demon beast was none other than the female Ziho. And inside that cave, there were currently countless divine race members coming out in a single file. Some wore heavy armor that shone with golden light. Some rode divine dragons that looked like gigantic lizards with wings. Some of them were riding tall horses covered in armor and holding long spears in their hands. That was an army of Protoss. Previously, the Protoss had only been probing. This time round, the god race had truly launched an attack on Tianhuang mainland. The aura of the god race expert in the lead was terrifying. Even though it was just a picture, the three of them felt suffocated and their chests tightened. This was the Emperor of the Protoss. Moreover, there was more than one. At the bottom of this picture were the same words as the fifth picture, Ancient War. I got it, Extreme Fire said in a deep voice. At the same time that the Dragon Phoenix, Kun Ping and the Primordial Eight races started the Primordial War against Kunlun, the Protoss also started a war against Tianhuang mainland. The world only knows about the earth-shattering battle outside of Kunlun, but they don't know that there is a god in the depths of Kunlun. His back is to Tianhuang, and he's blocking the god-slaying canyon. He's fighting alone against the Protoss army and protecting Kunlun. This is the true Primordial War. The three of them stared blankly at this scene. For some reason, their eyes gradually turned red. Since ancient times, the world had misunderstood the deities. Gods were forbidden. However, he was not the god of massacre, but the true god that protected Tianhuang mainland. The three of them could not imagine what Tianhuang mainland would be like without the two deities protecting Kunlun. After standing in front of the two pictures for a long time, the three of them continued forward and arrived before the seventh picture. From the seventh picture, they could vaguely tell that the Primordial War had already ended. The Kunlun mountain range was completely reduced to ruins with corpses everywhere and blood stained the vast expanse. The mountains and rivers were shattered, the firmaments were pierced, and the stars were destroyed. It was a scene of devastation and sorrow. Countless Protoss corpses were piled up above the god-slaying canyon. No more god race clansmen walked out of the cave filled with multicolored light. The Zisu was paralyzed on the corpses of many Protoss and was covered in wounds. His life force was draining rapidly and his eyes were dim. However, he still glared at the cave stubbornly. The Golden Hoe was defeated and had already retreated to the god-slaying canyon, standing side by side with the Zisu. As for the Dragon Phoenix and Kun Peng, the two taboos left the Primordial Eight races behind and chased after the Golden Hoe. When they arrived here, they saw the scene in the god-slaying canyon. Instantly, it was as though the two taboos understood everything. Against the two gods, the two taboos bowed their heads in regret. However, the Primordial War was already irreversible. Both gods were severely injured and could not reverse the situation. In this battle, they had exhausted all of their lives. Even until the end, the Zisu did not take a single step back and killed all the Protoss in the god-slaying canyon. The seventh picture, Taboo Death. The Dragon Phoenix and the Kun Peng, the two deity puppets, were severely injured in the battle. Both gods were dead. Not long after, the Dragon Phoenix and Kun Peng failed their tribulations and turned into ashes because of their heavy injuries. Su Zimo finally understood why the Grand Elder of the Jew Dragons told him that the Dragon Phoenix was filled with regret before she died. That regret was not because of the scars from this battle. It was because the Dragon Phoenix felt guilty towards the two gods, although the Protoss was the cause of the Primordial War. However, the Dragon Phoenix and Kun Peng might have had their own selfish motives. It could be imagined that the Dragon Phoenix and Kun Peng would definitely be wary of the two strongest gods of the Primordial Era. They might have had the thought of suppressing the gods. That was the reason why they were instigated by the Protoss and started the Primordial War. Su Zimo laughed mockingly. Poor gods. They protected Kunlun and Tianhuang mainland. But in the end, they were misunderstood by the world. The saddest thing is that even their descendants were despised by the world and hunted down by future generations. They almost died in Tianhuang mainland. It's all because of the Protoss. Extreme Fire said hatefully with rage in his eyes. Nianqi pursed her lips and did not say anything, her face pale. Although the primordial war had nothing to do with her, the bloodline of the Protoss flowed in her body. She felt that she had let down the Night Spirit and the entire Tianhuang mainland. The three of them continued and arrived before the 8th picture. That was also the last picture. It was in the sky above Kunlun ruins. Golden Ho and Zi Ho burned their last bit of life and burst forth with a dazzling light that enveloped Kunlun ruins. The gazes of the two god puppets fell on the egg not far away. Their eyes were filled with deep reluctance and worry. There were 4 words below the 8th picture, Kunlun barrier. At that point, a look of realization flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. He finally understood the origin of the Kunlun barrier. He finally understood the meaning of the barrier's existence. On one hand, the Kunlun barrier was to seal the 5-colored cave to prevent the Protoss from invading again. On the other hand, it was to protect the Night Spirit. With the existence of the Kunlun barrier, Kunlun ruins was isolated from the world. The people outside could not enter and the people inside could not leave. It was even more impossible for the primordial races to enter Kunlun ruins. The races that remained were the old subordinates of the two gods. Only in such an environment could the Night Spirit grow safely and become a taboo. And when the Night Spirit grew, he would rule the old subordinates of Kunlun ruins and become the new master of Kunlun. Chapter 1510. The two gods had put in a lot of effort. Even though they had died, they were still worried about the Protoss and the Night Spirit. That was why they burned their lives to leave behind the Kunlun barrier. Unfortunately, by chance, Fairy Ling Long entered the Kunlun ruins and took the Night Spirit away, placing him in the exquisite secret realm. In this life, when the Night Spirit returned, the Kunlun ruins was no longer his world. Su Zimo looked at the 8 paintings with a complicated expression and remained silent for a long time. The 8 paintings solved all the mysteries and revealed all the secrets of the primordial war. However, the 8 paintings could not explain the tragedy, and desolation behind the war. If not for the painter's wonderful brush, if they had not come to these ruins and seen these 8 paintings, who would have known the truth of the primordial war? The two gods must have hated the Protoss to the core. That's why they left such great killing intent and resentment in the Kunlun barrier. Nianqi said in a daze. Unlike Su Zimo and Extreme Fire, Nianqi felt extremely uncomfortable after reading the 8 paintings. She fell into endless self-blame and guilt. She did not know how to face the Night Spirit and Su Zimo in the future. It was her ancestor who started the primordial war, indirectly killing the Night Spirit's parents, indirectly killing countless races. Countless innocent living beings were buried in these ruins. Nianqi even felt that the blood flowing in her body was dirty. Nianqi, it's not your fault. Don't think too much. Su Zimo noticed that Nianqi's expression was strange. He vaguely guessed something and comforted her softly. Nianqi forced a smile and lowered her head in a daze. I got it. Right at this moment, Extreme Fire said in a deep voice, Night Spirit has been placed in the exquisite secret realm since ancient times. This Kunlun ruins has no leader, and these old subordinates are fighting each other. With the Taotia's methods and combat strength, it's very easy for him to become the master of Kunlun. And the current master of Kunlun is the descendant of that Tao. The Night Spirit has returned and wants to rule Kunlun. He will definitely clash with this Tao. That's why the so-called war to exterminate the rebels broke out. After pausing for a moment, Extreme Fire continued, however, time has passed. After so many years, the Taotai clan has long established supreme prestige in the Kunlun ruins. Even the return of the Night Spirit can't compare. Su Zimo nodded and said, but no matter what, the Taotai is only an old subordinate of Xinyu. The Night Spirit is the true master of Kunlun. Based on the information from the Taotai, the night spirit was not alone in Kunlun ruins. Even though countless years had passed, there were still many Kunlun people who stood firmly on the side of the night spirit. I'm just a little curious. Extreme Fire frowned and said, although the Taotai has a huge number of Kunlun people with the night spirit's methods, how could he have lost so miserably? Su Zimo narrowed his eyes slightly and recalled what the Lord of Kunlun had once said. His heart skipped a beat as he said, "It's the Protoss." What? Extreme Fire asked subconsciously. Su Zimo said, the Lord of Kunlun once said that the guests he invited will also arrive in Kunlun ruins today. These so-called guests are most likely the Protoss. You're saying that the Kunlun barrier that seals the five-colored cave might not be able to stop the Protoss? Extreme Fire's heart skipped a beat. That's possible. Su Zimo pondered and said, this barrier has existed for countless years after all. It's normal for its power to decline. Do you still remember when we first arrived at the Kunlun barrier? I once passed through the Kunlun barrier. Extreme Fire nodded. Su Zimo continued, normally speaking, even I can't pass through the barrier left behind by two gods who burned their lives. Now that I can pass through the barrier, it's not surprising that the Protoss can pass through as well. Su Zimo's expression was cold as killing intent surged in his eyes. He said coldly, if this Taotai is only fighting with the night spirit for the Lord of Kunlun, it's not considered a great evil. However, his collusion with the Protoss is unforgivable. Extreme Fire also became murderous as he said, let's go. Let's rush over and turn the world upside down. Su Zimo did not say a word. He had already leaped up and sped towards the god-slaying canyon in the west. Extreme Fire followed closely behind. Nian Qi hesitated for a moment before hurriedly following. God-slaying canyon. Many members of the Kunlun race with purplish gold ribbons around their waists guarded the entrance of the canyon. Gazing westward along the canyon, one could see that one Protoss after another was walking out of the huge cave that shone with colorful brilliance. These Protoss held large swords and spears in their hands and wore armor. Their expressions were cold, but none of them could pass through the god-slaying canyon. That was because in the middle of the canyon, there was a terrifying figure with a towering demonic aura. This figure was hundreds of feet tall and covered in purplish gold scales. The tail behind it was slender and extremely sharp, as if it could pierce through everything. This demon beast's head was huge, like a wolf's head, but it was even more ferocious than a wolf's head. A mouthful of sharp teeth shone with a cold light. Such a huge head could erupt with astonishing bite force. Coupled with this mouthful of sharp teeth, the lethality was unimaginable. The demon beast's four legs shone with purplish gold flames, melting the corpses of the Protoss under its feet. These Protoss rushed forward and were all killed by this demon beast. Beneath its feet lay the corpses of the Protoss, with warm blood flowing. The purplish gold demon beast opened its mouth and let out an earth-shattering roar toward the five-colored cave not far away. Its killing intent was piercingly cold. Amidst this roar, all the members of the Kunlun race on the other side of the canyon seemed to be stunned. They actually stopped in their tracks and stopped moving. Ha! At this moment, a loud laugh sounded. Not far from the east, a black mass of spirit ships sped over. On the huge ship in the lead, the Taotai and the four commanders stood at the bow of the ship. Demonic aura surged as they let out waves of laughter. Another 10 million Kunlun army had arrived. The Kunlun race members with purplish gold ribbons guarding the entrance of the canyon revealed despair in their eyes. There were only a few 100,000 of them left. Moreover, every Kunlun race member was injured. Be it in terms of numbers or strength, the difference between the two sides was too great. With the arrival of the Taotai, the last hope in their hearts was also extinguished. The commander of the old subordinates of the god of puppets looked back at the tall figure in the canyon and sighed softly in his heart. Although the son of puppets was young, he already had the demeanor of the two puppets of the past. If not for the invasion of the Protoss, under the leadership of the son of puppets, even if the Taotai had dozens or hundreds of times the number advantage, they would still be able to win in one battle. However, the son of puppets could not escape at all. On one side was the Kunlun race. On the other side was the Protoss. The son of puppets could only make a choice. His choice was the same as his mother's. He guarded the god-slaying canyon alone and blocked all the Protoss outside. Even if he died in battle, he would not allow a single Protoss to step into Tianhuang region. Chapter 1511. Hee. The Taoye's expression was relaxed as he looked at the Kunlun race guarding the entrance of the canyon. He shook his head and smiled. What are you all still holding on for? That beast is just a trapped beast, it won't last long. A half-martial ancestor who was the leader of these Kunlun race shouted as he dragged his wounded body to the front and shouted, "How dare you? The old master's corpse is right here. How dare you point your weapon at the young master? How dare you call the young master a beast? Are you not afraid of the wrath of the heavens?" The old master's spirit in the heavens, if he sensed this, even if it's just a wisp of his remnant soul, he can still kill him here. Not far away in the canyon, there were two corpses of demonic beasts that were hundreds of feet tall. One of them had golden bones and the other had purple bones. Were they the two gods from back then? Two gods? Ling Liao? Bai? Li Liao? Was Pan Yu able to tell the difference? Li Hui Huang Jiaoling? Li Liao Pa Zhao Xingna? The Taotai frowned slightly. Two gods? Li Ti Li Liao Song Zong? Qi? Is Jing Shu helping Yi to cut the bed for Xie? As for the wrath of the heavens, he scoffed. But the Taotai was still wary. Back then, these two gods? Li Nanju? What's more, his ancestors were these two gods. Li Muqian? Difficult? Major Li? Admonition? Li Bai Dan? Xiong Pang Li? Li Muji Dan? This time, if he didn't join forces with the Protoss, he wouldn't dare to challenge the gods? Li Bai Dan? The Taoist sneered, "Listen up, Kunlun race, I can give you a chance. If you submit to me now, I can let you go and treat you equally in the future. If you don't submit now, I will treat you as traitors and kill you without mercy." Ha. The half-martial ancestor of the Kunlun race laughed. His expression was sorrowful and angry. He shouted, "Traitors? What a joke, what a joke. Young master as a god? Li Liao? Harmony and harmony? Color thief, Mei Sua Bai Lu? Lang Zhong Wan Yu Huayin you dizzy? Suck? My soul is dazzled? Climb up the social ladder? Nagi, Han Quan, you are really stubborn." The Taoai sneered, "It's been so many years, yet you still remember what happened back then. Let me tell you, I am the master of Kunlun. How dare this little bastard compete with me?" Half-martial ancestor Cold Spring also sneered, "Taotai, no matter how many years have passed, our clansmen will always remember the ancestral teachings left behind by our old master. Even when the two old masters died in battle, they did not allow the Protoss to step into infinite wasteland. And what have you done? What are you all doing?" Half-martial ancestor Cold Spring only had a few 100,000 Kunlun race members. Compared to the Taoye's Kunlun army of more than 10 million, the difference was too great. However, at that moment, half-martial ancestor Cold Spring pointed at the Taotai and the Kunlun army opposite him and hollered. However, the 10 million Kunlun army was silent. Countless Kunlun clansmen lowered their heads, not daring to look at him. The Taoye's expression darkened as he said slowly, "That's right. The old masters had their backs to infinite wasteland to protect Kunlun. But what happened to them? They're all dead. I don't want to die. I don't want the Kunlun clansmen who followed me to die here either. After so many years, the Protoss has recuperated and is even stronger than in the primordial era. As for infinite wasteland, there are no longer two gods? What a joke! What a joke! You want to stop the god race with just the likes of you and that conjoint body brat? How naive! The Kunlun clansmen at the entrance of the valley had dim expressions and despair in their eyes. They knew that the Taotai was right. The Protoss had made a comeback. However, they could not defend against it at all. The Taotai said indifferently, "Cold Spring, this is the trend. The trend is surging and anything that stands in its way will be crushed into nothingness. What bullsh asterisk T trend? Half-martial ancestor Cold Spring sneered. There's a divine power forbidden zone in Kunlun ruins. Even the patriarchs of the Protoss wouldn't dare to barge in. Fufu. Right then, a chuckle sounded from beside the Tao. At this point, the three white-robed Protoss no longer concealed their identities and auras. The white robes on their bodies exploded, revealing golden armor inside. The black hair of the three Protoss turned golden rapidly. Their disguises disappeared. Even without the Mahayana Patriarch, the two armies of the Protoss are enough to flatten Kunlun ruins. Those are two armies formed by conjoint body mighty figures and half-martial ancestors of our mainland of gods. Wherever the divine sword points, everything under the iron hooves will have to submit. A Protoss smiled and said proudly, "Those who entered this place are merely the vanguard." Half-martial ancestor Cold Spring glared at the Tautai and gritted his teeth. "Tai, you've forgotten your ancestors. To think that you're joining forces with the Protoss. Are you worthy of being called the Master of Kunlun? It's not up to you to decide whether I'm worthy or not." The Tautai gradually revealed an impatient expression and shook his head slightly. "In the end, it's nothing more than the winner taking all. You guys will definitely die in this battle. Who will remember you guys? The future generations will only remember me. I'm the true master of Kunlun. If you guys aren't willing to submit, don't blame me for being heartless." The Tautai waved his hand and ordered coldly, "Kill!" Right then, a long roar sounded from the distant horizon. It rumbled over like thunder and the clouds in the sky dispersed. The roar was still far away, but many of the Kunlun people present felt their ears buzzing. It was clear how terrifying the roar was. The Tautai smiled and said proudly, "Cold Spring, the new commander I just recruited is here. I'll let you see what he's capable of." "So powerful." Half-martial ancestor Cold Spring and the others were shocked. Hearing this roar, the huge figure that was fighting the Protoss in the canyon trembled slightly and looked back in disbelief. He saw a familiar figure in his line of sight. Green robes and black hair. God? Pleiades? Drooping palms? Major? Shin? Pang yu tetsangyor. God? Goinadogu? Shin? Shameful Lu Fei? Two howls echoed in the sky above the Kunlun ruins. A Protoss took the opportunity to charge forward. Sword in God? Goinadoshi? Goinadogu? Mansion God? Luogu? Fake Fanulin? Guyong? Goinado Minado? Shaking or you? Shindregs? Nanji? Thumb Mountain? God? Luo Min Ren by Luo Luo? Major Su Zimo's expression was cold as he rushed over at lightning speed. Extreme Fire and Nian Chi followed closely behind. The three of them looked at the figure that was fighting with the Protoss in the god-slaughtering canyon. The picture that they saw in the palace just now appeared in their minds. A god in the picture? Odo Yunan Imo? Song Yu Lao Yu Rong Yu Lin? Thunder Fate Points Luo Luo Luo? Luo Luo Wu. The scene in front of them seemed to be the same as the god in the picture? Shin? Shindan? Huan Ji Shun Shu. The vision of the three gradually blurred. Knight's spirit endured the misunderstandings of the future generations, the fear of the people, and the hostility of the myriad races. He stood alone in the canyon with his back to Tianhuang, protecting Kunlun. Even though no one knew about all of this. Even if he might die and his Tao vanish. Knight's spirit had made his choice in the end. Just like his mother. God? Shindan? Shindan? Shin? Right crying oh, at the back oh? End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.